and get started this evening. Welcome. First off, is there a motion to accept or modify the agenda?
Madam Chair, I move to amend the agenda in the following ways. First, I would like to request that we add to possibly section 4A, it might be appropriate, to add the discussion of the biased curriculum that has been happening at Warren County Middle School. I would also like to ask that we move from the consent agenda section 2C, the discipline report from Dr. Ballinger. If we could move that to be in the same section as the disciplinary report from the SRO, it would just make a lot more sense if we had those two presented at the same time. Also, I had a question regarding, I see that the approval of minutes was removed from the consent agenda. Are we that's just not being discussed at all now? Like, it's not being voted on?
I think it wasn't ready.
We've just removed it altogether?
I believe Mr. Valentine just removed it for this evening.
Okay. And then finally, in the closed meeting, I see we have 2 employee personnel discipline discussions, but there should be 3. There should be the 2 for the discipline for the biased curriculum and the 1 for the flying of the pride flag against policy. So if we could please add a 3rd.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Any discussion on this?
Can you repeat all those? That was a lot.
Yes, no, it was a lot. Okay, so the first one was just to clarify, because we had seen the minutes that were added, but they needed to be amended, and then I didn't see them on the agenda anymore, so I just wanted to clarify that had been removed from the initial agenda that went out. So that's not really a modification. The modification happened before the meeting. The first easy one was to simply move section 2C, which is the discipline report from Dr. Ballinger, which is typically on the consent agenda. But what I was hoping to do going forward was to have it presented to us in section 3B with the resource officer report and update. That way we're just keeping like items together. The next one was to add to the agenda the biased curriculum, which my thinking was we could add it into section 4A because it does fall under instructional expectations. It would just be an addition to that item. I'm not opposed to having it added as its own section, which would put it as 4F. Either way, need to have that discussion. And then finally was the action to convene a closed session. Currently we have 2 employee numbers listed for discipline by the school board, and there should be 3. We had 3 discussions to have. It was the 2 from the biased curriculum and the 1 for the flying a pride flag in a classroom against school policy. So it would have just been adding employee number 2025-0219-03.
Any additional discussion? For Dr. Ballinger's report, are you just wanting him to verbally say that?
Yeah, just even a brief summary of initially when we used to discuss the discipline reports. It's very helpful to hear the trends of these are the behaviors we're seeing, this is improving, this is declining. Just having the report on there with blanket numbers and no context, right? Makes it kind of devalues its purpose on the agenda. I know I received some questions over the last month about the discipline report, and I mean, I'm sure we've all seen that posts on social media about bullying and other types of behaviors, and I thought it would be helpful as a community to simply not just have these children listed as numbers on a screen, but an actual, like, hey, parents, let's talk to our kids about bullying. I know it's been helpful to have the SRO reminding parents to speak to their kids about vaping and those types of things. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate or fancy, just to consolidate those two items that are of related content into the same category and just have a very brief presentation. And I know I'm putting you on the spot with like asking, I'm not asking for like a fancy presentation by any means. Just a brief word or two about the disciplinary issues inside the schools.
Any additional discussion?
I mean, I do feel like that sounds a little bit last minute. Like, I feel like maybe that's something we could talk about for a future meeting, but I don't love the idea of putting people on the spot who haven't prepared that.
I assumed that since the report was put together and posted on the agenda that there would be some basic knowledge that could be shared.
Mr. Valentine, could you do roll call, please?
Yes. Dr. Funk?
No.
Mrs. Lowe?
No.
Mr. McFadden?
Yes.
Madam Chair?
No.
Mrs. Salins?
Yes.
All right, next up this evening, we have the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
There was no approved
yeah,
agenda at
approved.
this
You guys
point,
don't
so
have
I'd like
approved
to make a
agenda.
substitute,
Okay.
a substitute motion, please. I would request that we modify the agenda in the following ways. That we add a section to this agenda to discuss the bias curriculum that is being taught in Warren County Middle School. And that we add, as agreed before the meeting, employee number 3 to tonight, so that we address all 3 employees for discipline as discussed prior to this meeting.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Any discussion on that?
I would just like to remind the board that in order for us to have the closed session discussion about employee discipline, about a biased curriculum, that it would be a direct violation of FOIA law. I did speak with the FOIA council this morning. They said we must discuss the curriculum matters in open meeting, that it is not exempted by the Freedom of Information Act to discuss those matters in a closed session. It is a curriculum that has already been presented publicly to students, and so it therefore falls under open meeting.
I have no issue discussing the curriculum. I would just like for us to be able to do it in a setting when our assistant superintendent of curriculum is prepared to have that public discussion with us.
Well, the problem is that it's being taught continually inside the school, and we're getting continuous complaints. It was first reported on February 9th. It is now 10 days later. We are receiving a growing number of complaints. The curriculum is continuing to be taught. So we have to be willing and ready to have that conversation. There's no excuse for anybody to not be prepared to have that. They presented us with documents in email format of the curriculum. Everybody should be prepared to have a basic conversation about what is taught. We've all been presented with it at this point in time. We now have had 3 complaints from the Republican committee. We have had the chair of the 6th district of the Republican Party of Virginia complain. We have had the chair and vice chair of the Warren County Republicans complain, and the secretary of the Young Republicans complain. I fear if we do not take action tonight to at least have a discussion, that the next step will be to hear from an attorney from the RNC. I mean, it's very cut and dry. We have a document, the Republican National Committee's platform, and it has been misrepresented and cited on a document provided to minor children that it is stating that it is the RNC platform when it is not. And the citation is listed at the bottom of the document. So I think we need to have this conversation.
I mean, it sounds to me like we're talking about a lesson plan, not a curriculum. And I don't know that that is something that we would need to discuss, an individual lesson plan.
You don't think that we need to discuss biased political information being disseminated to children that is in direct violation of school board policy? And you want to have a conversation in closed session to discipline staff members about it. The part of the conversation that must take place in an open public meeting is the part of the conversation that deals with matters to be handled in an open public meeting. The lesson that has been publicly presented to children with a false citation of the RNC platform. Once we get behind closed doors, we will discuss the employees directly. That, under no circumstances, during the discussion in the public meeting, will we state anything about said employees. This board doesn't even know who those employees are, so that'll be easy to do. However, in order to discuss those employees in the closed session, as is listed on our agenda and has been since Friday, we must first discuss the content with which has landed us in this position. And yes, this complaint was lodged 10 days ago. That's ample time.
And
If
our
the
school
board-
administrators have been working on it.
We have
since
received no
they've
formal
received it.
in-public update on that. We have parents who are continuing to complain. We have the lesson continuing to be incorrectly taught. How much damage do we need to continue to allow to happen before we do something to act? It would be negligent not to have the conversation. This is a work session. We can certainly have a work session discussion on it. I'm willing to concede that if we move it off of the action agenda section and we move it to the work session, section 5, we could add it as section 5D. But the conversation needs to happen. And I would hope that this board would not wish to shy away from issues such as this. We have parents coming to us with concerns. We have to be willing to have these hard conversations.
I still feel like I'm hearing, to me, it's a different thing between a lesson plan and a curriculum. And if
Then
there's a
call it a
lesson
a
plan,
lesson.
excuse me, if there's a lesson plan that is not matching the curriculum, that is something that the principal would address.
It's a lesson plan
it's
in
not
which
something the school
biased,
board would discuss.
incorrect
I understand you don't
information
like
is
the
posed.
lesson.
They list a citation of the Republican National Committee platform that is falsely represented.
Right, and so if there's a problem with the lesson, that would be something for the principal to address with the staff member. That's not the curriculum. Our curriculum does not say falsely represent the
Again, I
Republican Party
said we
platform.
can switch if you want to switch the word to lesson, we can switch the word to lesson. Don't mince words, let's have the conversation. Why are you afraid to have the conversation? We are teaching this to minor children. We are giving surveys illegally to minor children. We are violating our own policies in multiple ways, and this board is going to shy away from this. If you fail to take action, this is where things snowball. Swift action, we deal with things. How many times do we hear constantly, the board doesn't do anything, the board doesn't do anything, the board doesn't do anything? Well, let's take action. We can have a conversation. If the end of that conversation is to direct the principal to amend the lesson plan, then so be it. But we cannot continue for another 10 days, 2 weeks, however long, until our next meeting before we have this conversation. The taxpayers of this community, like it or not, are 70% Republican, and they pay the salaries of the teachers in the schools. We have school board policy that has been violated in 2 different ways, both giving out a survey without parental consent and teaching political biased information. And on top of that, you have somebody who has defamed the Republican National Committee's platform by falsely citing that they took that information from the platform when clearly they did not.
Well, let's say we did have an employee who has violated our policy. That is still not something that we as a board would discuss in open session. I don't think we're talking about our curriculum.
We're
I think
talking
we're
about a
talking about
lesson
the
plan.
actions of an
We're talking about a
individual
lesson
employee.
plan
Right,
that
a
has
lesson
violated,
plan.
right.
We
And
don't
when
write
this wa-
lesson plans.
We wouldn't be having to have this conversation as a board if, as of the report on February 9th of the bias political lesson plan, if action had been taken to stop it. It has not been stopped. We have gotten additional complaints since then, and it is continuing to be taught.
My
So this
understanding
board
is
must
it's a
take
one-day
action.
lesson. My understanding is it was a one-day lesson that's over. We got the update. We know the things that we can address policy-wise moving forward.
It wasn't
with the
one
survey.
day, it's continued, and the email that we got right before this meeting even discussed that. It was, more discussions were had and assignments given as of Monday. This has continued. So if the discussion, to be honest with you, we're having the discussion right now. So why don't we move it to an appropriate section of the meeting so that we can let our future farmers of America give their presentation and go on about their day? But the conversation needs to happen. As a board, from there, we can collectively decide if we take action, take no action, direct a principal to take action, or what have you. But the conversation needs to happen. It needs to stop happening just through email. And something needs to be done. We have multiple parents and staff members who have complained about this. And as a board, we would be derelict of our duties if we didn't deal with it. I'm sorry if it's an uncomfortable conversation, but we have to have it.
It isn't uncomfortable. It's just that it's 5:30 on the day of our meeting, and we expect our administrators, we expect our staff to be prepared for anything that's going to be on the agenda to present to us ahead of time, and now we're
Well,
here switching this all
in
up.
all fairness, was discussed 10 days ago, and our administrators have presented us through email in direct violation of FOIA if we don't now speak about it. These types of decisions can't be done through private email. We need to have the public conversation. We have a very simple and easy way to handle this appropriately, and that is to have the conversation, have it in a public meeting session as is appropriate, and move on before we end up served with what? We want more lawsuits, more legal fees because we've defamed the Republican National Committee and their platform with a written citation that flat out does not match. Our administrator, Dr. Ballinger, should be prepared with this. He's the one who sent us all of this information with his summation in an email. If all we have to have is a discussion where we remove the administrators from it completely and we say, as a board, here are the concerns. Let's discuss the concerns. Administrators have an update for us at the next meeting. Then so be it. But this needs to happen in open session. And a vote to not have this conversation in open session is a vote to violate FOIA, and it is a vote to hide and obscure what is going on inside of our schools from the parents of this community.
Any additional discussion? And I'm sorry, did you modify your motion to move it to the work session?
Yes, we can move it to section 5D for the as a work session item. So right now we have two matters to be voted on. One is moving discussion of the bias lesson plan to 5D, and the addition of employee number 2025-0219-03 to the closed session.
Is there a second on that?
I second it.
Mr. Valentine, could you do roll call, please?
Yes. Mrs. Salins,
Aye.
Madam Chair,
No.
Mr. McFadden,
Aye.
Mrs. Lowe,
No.
Dr. Funk.
No.
Is there a motion to accept or modify the agenda?
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I second.
Discussion on that?
Madam Chair, I again request that you take control of the room with the laughing. Just so you know, I don't get intimidated by people who are laughing and making fools of themselves. But
Please stop laughing. Okay.
we agreed in email that we would be talking about discipline of 3 employees. 3 employee numbers did not end up on this agenda.
I will say that I think my interpretation and your interpretation are different. I don't agree that that was the factual information that we received, and I'm content with the vote that we have at
So
the
you're
table.
content to not discipline an employee in direct violation of the policy who is flying a pride flag in the classroom? You do not
Again,
wish to discipline that
I
employee.
believe we are interpreting things differently, and my interpretation and understanding of the processes to which we have at this point, I'm content with this vote that's on the floor.
I'm glad that you've stated as such.
Mr. Valentine, could you do roll call, please?
Yes. Dr. Funk?
Yes, aye.
Mrs. Lowe?
Aye.
Mr. McFadden?
No.
Madam Chair?
Aye.
Mrs. Salins?
No.
Next up this evening, we have reports. We have our FFA members here. Dr. Costner.
Madam Chair, board members, tonight I'm very pleased to I'm going to give you a quick synopsis. In 1928, a group of young farmers were founded, what was called the Future Farmers of America. And since then, it's grown to be the National FFA organization. And this is an organization that helps students to develop leadership, careers through agriculture education. And I'm going to start something here, and I hope, I don't know, you may want to chime in. I believe in the future of agriculture with a faith born not of words but of deeds. That is the beginning of the FFA creed. Actually, they have competition to do that. Yeah. But anyway, I'm excited to introduce to you Miss Buckland. Almost got it wrong. Here, and she also has Miss Meadows, and all 4 chapters are represented too. I understand. Is that correct? So I'm going to turn the floor over to them, and thank you all for everything you do.
Good evening. My name is Grace Buckland, and I'm the ag teacher and FFA advisor at Skyline High School. This is my 9th year being a Hawk, and the 9th year since both high school programs' inception. The 4 FFA advisors of Warren County, along with a few of their members, are here to tell you about the FFA chapters and how they're celebrating National FFA Week this week. Each year, FFA chapters around the country celebrate National FFA Week. It's a time for members and chapters to share what FFA is and the impact that it has on its members every single day. To begin, please welcome Ms. Harley and Ms. Lynn Phillips from the Warren County Middle School FFA chapter.
My name is Harley Brooks. I am a 7th grader at Warren County Middle School, and I am the president of the FFA chapter. The Warren County Middle School FFA chapter has grown tremendously over the past years. We are excited for the future. From hands-on learning, to leadership development, our members have gained valuable skills and unforgettable experiences. We've expanded agriculture inside and outside the classroom, cultivating a thriving vegetable garden, hatching baby chicks, and caring for 6 classroom rabbits, including our Adopt a Bunny program. Bella, our vice president, personally cares for a Flemish giant rabbit named Hazel. She was adopted last year. These experiences provide both education and mental wellness benefits for our students. I launched the Smart Start tutoring program last August to support 6th graders in core subjects working with teachers to keep students on track. We also hosted makers workshops like succulent plants, reef making to foster creative and hands-on learning while engaging in the community. A major highlight was sending 5 members to the National FFA Convention in Indianapolis, where they attended workshops, explored careers, and bonded as a team. Skyline High School and Warren County High School attended as well. We also partnered with Signal Knott Middle School FFA in Strasburg for events like the Virginia State Fair, Virginia Tech Middle School Leadership Conference, and the Grow Your Own program at Virginia State University. For National FFA Week, we're celebrating with Spirit Week activities such as trivia content and a teacher and staff appreciation breakfast, which you all are invited to attend this Friday morning at Warren County Middle School. Looking ahead, we are excited to continue growing, learning, and serving our community. Please welcome Colby from the Skyline Middle School chapter.
The Skyline Middle School chapter meets monthly to discuss numerous chapter-related topics and goals. This year, we set a goal to increase our community service and involvement. We began by decorating a large hay bale at the school in support of the Virginia Farm Bureau's Women's Leadership Committee, whose goal is to spread agriculture awareness. Our John Deere tractor-themed hay bale became a focal point at SMS and got the attention of the local community. Over the holidays, we rang the bell for the Salvation Army, entered a float into the local Christmas parade, and participated in our school togetherness tree program, which helps bring holiday tidings to families that may otherwise not have the means. This spring, SMS FFA has been gearing up for a state convention in June, doubling our number of attendees from last year and competing in numerous career development events, such as agriculture technology, mechanics, horse evaluation, livestock evaluation, and small animal care. We do numerous fundraising events to help cover the costs, including selling strawberries and meat sticks. We are deeply thankful for our family, schools, and community support in this endeavor. To speak on behalf of Warren County High School, please welcome Grace Ross, and Miss Lee Meadows.
The Warren County High School FFA chapter was originally established around 1929 and diminished in 1972. With the help of Miss Jane Barker, the Warren County Baker, the Warren County Public Schools CTE director at the time, and the Warren County Farm Bureau Agriculture and the FFA were brought back to Warren County in 2016. Originally reestablished as a spirit teaching position between the two high schools. Traction for both programs increased significantly within the 5 years, warranting 2 full-time teachers, 1 at each school. The Warren County FFA chapter has grown immensely in the last 4 years. Members frequently participate in contests all over the state of Virginia that include hippology, livestock evaluation, meat judging, and so much more. This year, our chapter has completed 2 community service events so far that include making pot holders and collecting hygiene products for CCAP. The pot holders that we made were a product of a national Living to Serve grant that we were in the process of making up to 400 of them. We're really proud of the hands-on, real-world experience that we've been able to offer this year. Our community and business partners have been an integral part of this by opening their farms, businesses, and knowledge to us. We'd like to thank Warren County Veterinary Clinic, Virginia Livestock LLC, and French Brothers Dairy Farm. Please welcome Bobby Ford and Ms. Grace Buckland to give us insight to the happenings at Skyline FFA.
Good evening. I am Bobby Ford, and I am currently serving as the 2024-2025 Skyline FFA Secretary. This is my 5th year as a member of the National FFA organization. Being an FFA member means so much to me because without FFA and the agricultural classes offered, I would not have had any of the opportunities that have been offered to me. The Skyline FFA chapter has offered more than 60 opportunities for the members to participate in chapter bonding activities, fundraisers, travel, competitions, and community service, and have approximately 15 to 20 more activities planned between now and the end of the school year. Our members have been dedicated to learning and active engagement this year by encouraging members to try new activities, increasing our chapter membership and families. Our goal for the new year was to increase family engagement. To accomplish this, we've created an alumni and supporters group similar to a booster club. We have opened our quarterly chapter dinners to include our parents and hosted a family potluck to celebrate the holidays together. Each of these opportunities have increased family engagement by more than 20% for the school year. We're proud to say that we have 4 parent volunteers that have been approved by central office, and 5 more are in the process of submitting their paperwork. To celebrate National FFA Week this week, our chapter has given the Skyline High School staff members 2 appreciation gifts, hosted a drive your tractor or ride your horse to school day, welcomed the Virginia State FFA officers into our building to present a workshop, hosted a members and families breakfast, and had spirit dress-up days for the entire school to participate in. Our FFA chapters and ag programs mean so much to many of the students at each of our schools. We appreciate you allowing us to share the positive impact that we've had on many students within Warren County Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you all. I don't think so. We didn't do the consent agenda. Yeah. I'm going to take us back up to the consent agenda and ask if there's a motion on that this evening.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
A second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
Alright, moving back down to reports. Next up, we have the school resource officer report and update.
Good evening. How's everyone tonight? I don't know if you can hear me or not. So January, as you can see, we were out probably a majority of the month. I think we were out more days than we were in school. So you see a huge decrease there. We only had 5 incidents reported to us in the month of January. I was going to look to see how many days we actually went to school, but it was hard to keep up with. So of the 5, we had an informational report, a possession of marijuana on school grounds, a abusive language at Skyline Middle School, and then a violation of a court order here, Diversified Minds, and then a destruction of property at Skyline High School. So I'd like to see it continue to stay that low. I know the amount of school days had a big help in that, but that's where we are for January. So not much to really report.
Any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up this evening, we have our ESS update. Mr. Smith.
Good evening, everyone. Well, first, thank the board. I submitted for the agenda last week. I believe you all should have received an updated version today. I apologize. Last Friday, when leaving, I uploaded the working edition, not the final version. So hopefully that's been clarified.
Is the one that's up there the new one?
Yeah, it's the updated one because
Okay.
they
It was added today.
Is the print copy, is this the updated one?
That's the one that was on there today.
I think it would have.
Yes, I believe it's updated. We had it updated today.
Okay.
So everything should be, the numbers were right. It was just a couple of the slides hadn't been removed from the previous month. So just checking after revised agenda, if we wanted to start on the page that's marked January and beyond. Just a couple of the activities that Amy's been participating in. We had the school admin visits. She had an upcoming visit with Christendom this weekend, or on Friday. There's the RMC Job Fair, Edge Career, Shenandoah next month in March. So, and we've been actively working with Career Services at Laurel Ridge to get on their job fair schedule. We're still waiting to hear back from them. Moving on to the next page, added January's statistics. We took a little bit of a drop from December. We were at 85% as a fill rate. We took a little bit of a hit down to 82%. Even with the days and dates, it affected a lot of our subs, being able to work and having days and cancellations. If we move on to the next day, or the next page, January's info, the district fill rate was 82%. After we factor in the building sub coverage, we would have been at 99%. Over 1,000 assignments have been picked up between March 1st and May 31st, so concluding the end of the year. And again, for the month of January, we posted an 82% fill rate, which would be the second month in a row, with a non-building based sub rate of over 80%. Moving on to December snapshot, just to review the numbers. We had the 861 absences, filled 733, unfilled were 128, giving us at a fill rate of 85.1. 2023's numbers I just put there in comparison. Flipping on to the next page, this was reviewed last month in January's meeting, but the December absences by school allocated. We see some of the fill rates in the numbers between 78, 100%. After the building subs, a majority of the schools were at the 99 to 100% fill rate. Again, showing the work that's being done. Moving on just to January snapshot. We did see a decrease in the number of absences, obviously, compared to 2023 with the snow days. Went down from 1,275 in 2023 to now 668. Of those, 552 were filled, leaving us 116, leaving us a fill rate of 82.6. I don't know why, but for some reason my metrics, it always rounds down. It did it last month too, but so it has us at 82.6% fill rate, which should be rounded up to 83. I know the math, but it's all reported and everything is 82, so I'm going to stick with that. Flipping on to the next page, we see the January absences by school. Again, we see an increase in the fill rates across a lot of the buildings. We had some of the schools add some building subs that were finally working full-time, which increased the general fill rate, which also increased the after-building sub rate. So you can see across the metrics, with the exception of the non-traditional, which had a couple of odd absences, just a few there, 2 were covered. Most of the schools are averaging, in that 87 to above 87% to that 90 to 99% range. I know everybody's focus. We move on to the next page, is the cost by building. I have it broken down August through, obviously you had January's numbers added in there. A little bit of a decrease from December, again, tied in with the fact that obviously shorter number of days. The total budget's there. And then on the next page, the year-to-date budget and the 2023 comparison column, the first column was just the overall budget that was approved by the board. So far spent year-to-date. I have the long-term absences separated. We don't have the long-term absences separated that were allocated that are being paid out of the supplemental school staff rather than from the building subs. It's something we talked about this today in a meeting that I should have for you next time at the next meeting, the breakdown of the allocation, which should put some more of the budget back into the schools. But as such, you'd have the remaining balances and then just a flat percentage versus what was spent in 2023. If you look at the remaining, we'd actually have the first school would be the school board office would be the first one to operate into the negative, would have exceeded their allocation this year. But financially, you can see at the bottom of the baseline versus 2023, $64,845 to the district's positive compared to what was spent last year, again, with the increase in the rates and the fills at the school. Were there any questions?
Questions for Mr. Smith?
So you expect that the sub-budget is going to stay on budget this year?
We expected them, obviously when you guys prepared the budget and forecasted, the things that we can't account for are like we had a pneumonia outbreak. So that's what wrecked Ressie Jeffries. If you look at like the high school compared to last year, what is it? Like Warren County's down almost $30,000 compared to last year. I don't know what happened last year. Maybe there was an illness or something that spiked through there. So projected, Dr. Ballinger and I talked today about forecasting out for the rest of the year, just to kind of see where we're at. He had let me know that Mr. Ballantyne does that automatically. But I just wanted to get another set, just comparing the previous year's data, just to kind of see a forecast so we can see if we're going to end to that, how close to that goal we're going to end. So, great question.
Thank you. Anything else for Mr. Smith?
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Have a great night. Stay warm. Sorry, every time I come here, I think I bring all the cold weather.
Next up this evening, we have the Health and Safety Comprehensive Plan update. Ms. Vernazza.
Thank you, Mr. Stefanoski. Good afternoon. I'm here to give you an update on how we're doing in meeting our objectives in regards to health and safety. Our mission is that all students and staff will be afforded a safe and engaging learning environment that promotes healthy behaviors and positive relationships for everyone every day. Our first objective, each school will actively engage in the Virginia Crisis Management, Safety Audit, and Threat Assessment System, as evidenced through the following strategies. Strategy 1, that all staff will be trained in relational MANT and behavioral management systems as of January 2025, which we have met. The next training for any new hires that we haven't will take place in March. Administrators will be trained in the threat assessment process. 100% of administrators have been trained in that threat assessment process within the past 3 years, which is recommended. And any new administrators or anyone who has not been trained in the past 3 years are registered for the next training coming up in March as well. Once again, 100% of Warren County Public Schools have participated in the yearly safety audit. We completed the 23-24. The next safety audit will take place in July of 2025, and we are 100% in compliance with our safety drills. Thank you, Mr. Stefnosky. All right, objective 2. Each school will actively engage in programs to prevent bullying, and the evidence we're looking for is a 20% decrease in referrals regarding bullying. Here's some data that we pulled for you. You'll see in 22-23 we saw a significant increase. I kind of contribute that to COVID had ended. We have had a hybrid school year, and this was the first year all students had come back in the building. 23-24, we had a 13% decrease. We took a deep dive into what the referrals we were getting. We were getting a lot of vaping, a lot of the bullying referrals, and so we took a strong stance against bullying and other things happening, and by 24-25, as of right now, we have a 54% decrease. So very proud of that, Warren County Public Schools. And the last objective, monitor procedures and guidelines in terms of school safety. I just want to point to number 4 first. To manage all the regulations in regard to school safety and keeping us safe and secure, we have developed a safety and security committee to oversee those procedures and guidelines to make sure that we're in compliance with everything. As of right now, number 1, we continue to make sure that our crisis management plans are up to date each year. That's essential. We've got to have plans of action if something takes place. Number 2, we have worked to update our wellness policy. It is currently in draft form. It is posted on the website for open comment. So please, I welcome you all. My email address is also listed on the website to please give me any feedback. This draft guidelines, it was developed with experts like Nicole with child nutrition, our instructional IRT, and Heather Bragg with instruction regarding the health and PE requirements. So please take a look at that, and we're taking feedback right now with that. And again, we continue to maintain our partnerships with local emergency agencies. That's a non-negotiable. We have to work together to keep our schools and safe.
Can I go back to that first slide, the safety audits? Can you just share a little bit more, like what is required yearly? Who does those? Do you work in collaboration with law enforcement to do those? How do those kind of play out?
So this was my first year working through that. And so the Department of Criminal Justice System sends out a survey, and a lot of it is how many threat assessments were completed in this school year. And a lot of that has to do with the discipline data, too, of how safe our schools are. So those are some of the questions that they compile. I'd be more than willing to share that our 23-24 safety audit with you to give you some more information.
And also at that time, when you look at the safety drills, so when we have lockdowns, our sheriff's office is out there. They go around, they'll go and check doors, and then they'll report to us, hey, we found this door unlocked, or we found this, we found that. Then administrators will work at addressing that. So that's part of those safety audits when we do those drills as well with our partnering agencies.
Thank you, Dr. Ballinger.
Where you said that there's an open comment period for the school wellness policy, where do we find that on?
I'll show you.
Yeah, currently,
Okay,
if you go to, thank you, Mr. Stefnosky, I'll let you lead the way.
I found, so it was posted in June, so it was a little ways back. Is that correct?
The current one, are you looking at, Ms.?
If I
Right
scrolled
there.
down, I got to June 26th in the. I didn't see an open one.
So currently on our website, we listed it under parents, under health and safety.
Under parents, okay, okay.
And we could probably also list that under district information as well, just as under general.
Okay.
I would think.
Mhm.
But-
And I would also like to add into special services regarding our students with special needs. We're collaborators in this effort. So thank you, Ms. Burley, and your department as well.
Any other questions for Ms. Bernazza? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Burley.
Next up this evening, we have our action agenda. Our first item is going to be instructional expectations. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to speak on that this evening? Ms. Frey?
Good evening. Before you are the Warren County Public Schools Instructional Expectations document. The document was first shared at the January 22nd work session of the board. And just to note that the addition of the instructional resource team contribution to the expectations was added in our discussion at that meeting. But other than that change, and it was updated to the board agenda from the 22nd of January, there hasn't been any additional changes to the document. The instructional expectations detail the resources and division purchased curriculum materials available to support teachers with lesson planning and delivery. For administrators, the expectations directly align with this year's professional development designed to increase the capacity of instructional leaders so that they may guide school improvement and positively impact the development of teachers and students in the building. And then, as I've already mentioned, to assist teachers and administrators with meeting these expectations, the division level support provided by the instructional resource team was added at the conclusion of the document as well. Any questions?
I had a few.
Sure.
In this document, so essentially what this document is doing, my understanding, is that we're saying that we're purchasing this curriculum and we expect teachers to use this curriculum. But what happens when, like we just discovered with our board, that the last time the civics curriculum was updated was 2012, and that even though a new curriculum was adopted in 2019, there was no money to purchase it, so now we're left without a curriculum, and teachers are left to have to make up their own lessons. That kind of creates like it doesn't create the best circumstance for the teachers, and then if we put this in place, then we do open the door for teachers who are getting in trouble for if we're not paying for curriculum and buying curriculum, what are they supposed to do?
So I am going to go down the road a little bit on semantics because I want to make sure we're all talking the same language as I move through this. So for the purposes of a curriculum, the curriculum is provided by the state through the standards of learning. That is the curriculum that we are, to teach. It covers the topics, the essential knowledge and skills that the students are to master. So that is the curriculum. We have a curriculum. The state updates that curriculum typically on a 7-year rotating basis. And just so to clarify for the public, sometimes the years don't align with, like, if you look it up right now, you would see 2015 social studies standards. Those are still in place for this school year, and they're working on an update that should go into effect next year. So sometimes that is confusing to people because it's got old years on it. So the curriculum is set forth by the standards of learning. The instructional resources that we use, that is our textbook purchases, our association with memberships like CIP, which you've probably heard me mention before. And so there are places where those resources can fill gaps where we have not been able to purchase textbooks. That being said, CIP focuses primarily on standards tested courses. So, where you have a SOL test is oftentimes where you will see a more robust CIP pacing guide, benchmarks, things like that, things of that nature. So for the sake of history, and I'm not going to venture into the discussion on the lesson plan per what the board voted on at the start of the meeting. But for the discussion of the curriculum for history, that is set by the Virginia Standards of Learning. We have a curriculum. What is lacking in textbook is that there hasn't been a county purchased textbook for history since 2012. I have advocated in front of this board multiple times to look at ensuring we have the funds set aside to purchase textbooks. And Dr. Ballinger has been a supporter of ensuring that Warren County has up-to-date textbooks that align with the standards that are currently in place. Prior to COVID, we were purchasing textbooks when money was available. When COVID happened, one of the ways we were able to use the funds was to upgrade our textbook purchases because we needed online curriculum, which social studies has not had in Warren County. They have not had an online textbook, so to speak. We did do some surveys at that time. We went through an adoption for social studies in 2019. The board adopted the proposed textbooks, but we weren't able to purchase. When COVID happened, we did do several surveys out to teachers because funds were starting to dwindle. We had purchased math textbooks, science textbooks, those textbooks that were required for part of the accreditation process. We had some money to purchase some social studies materials if needed. We had joined CIP at that time, so we had materials that CIP gave us access to, and through conversations and feedback and some Google, interest sheets and things like that to see if social studies was an area that we needed to spend money on during the COVID funds to purchase curriculum. We did not get a lot of feedback. There was even some indication that, we didn't need a textbook at the time. We felt like that CIP and what that was offering and what we had been doing previously covered it. I am an advocate for a textbook at social studies. Our teachers do need that support. It does provide that curriculum. Those textbook adoptions are open to the public. We take feedback. There is a process for a textbook adoption. And so you'll notice on this document that I'm asking you to vote on tonight, history does not have what you see at English, math, and science. The curriculum that is available to social studies right now is what is available in CIP, and we encourage that use of that curriculum or instructional material.
Yeah, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, no, it does. Thank you for answering that
Absolutely.
in great detail. And I do want to add, just so the public knows, 2019 was before all of our time.
Sure.
It was before you, before Dr. Ballinger, before this board.
Yes.
So, but now that we have identified it, I do think that should be a budget priority going forward. We have to have textbooks. I mean, we're in the business of educating. We have to have textbooks.
I agree. And it's, it is the resource that we can provide as a division to our teachers to give them guidance. It has review. It's gone through those processes as both a division, as a group of instructional leaders, the teachers, the administrators, my team, myself, Dr. Ballinger, and the public. That is where we can join together to meet the need of our students in a way that everyone is, fully transparent through it.
Right.
At this point, would you look at another textbook since I know it was adopted in 2019?
Oh,
but if we were gonna do it,
absolutely.
we would
The
just
standards,
start that process
start
again,
over.
right?
Yes, we would start over. The standards have changed. Full implementation of new social studies standards goes into effect next school year. As of right now, we do not have a VDOE-approved textbook list, and I am not sure when one is coming from the state. We can go through a local adoption process of our own. We don't have to purchase from the state, from the state list. We typically have. It eliminates some of the legwork on, is the book aligned and some of those sorts of things, but we are certainly capable of doing a local process if that's what the board directs us to do.
And a lot of times what you find out with the state, with their, with the instructional materials, with the textbooks, they may change their standards of learning and then not adopt or provide a list of state-approved textbooks for maybe sometimes a year to 2 years later. And so they've changed the standards, but they're behind on vetting the companies to make sure that you can purchase textbooks. But the main thing is that this is something that we've already made that decision. We made that decision early on in the budget process. And why did we make that decision? Because when we look at our accreditation and we're looking at our history scores, we just need to make sure that we do have some, and not saying that we have some great teachers that are doing great, but overall, when you look at what we've produced on our SOL assessments at the end of the year, history has not been where it needs to be. And so we have already made that decision. Okay, we're moving to this textbook. We're going to look and adopt because we need to give those tools to make sure that we're moving in the right direction.
And I would just add, Dr. Ballinger, that the piece that has been missing is the money piece for the purchase. We can go through an adoption, and that's what happened in 2019. We can go through an adoption, we can recommend this is the book we would purchase if money's available. But the money has not essentially been there to do that purchase. And that's the key piece to get that, over the finish line, is that we need the money to purchase the textbook.
And we'll talk a little bit about that in the presentation tonight on the budget about
Absolutely.
textbooks.
So the next question that I had about this was there is mention of tracking to monitor student progress. And I know this is something our board has discussed in the past. I'd really like to amend this document to make sure that it is in there that those trackers are presented to this board, because there's a lot that's not presented to us.
Are you talking there on the last bullet under
Yeah.
the elementary standards, and then it's also probably
Let's see, I had it in.
under each one, middle and at high school, it's the fourth bullet.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're tracking in various ways, elementary, middle, and high school. And I know that information makes it to the administrators, but it also really needs to make it to this board.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
So when I think about this document, I think of it being, for like
This is for
our
the teachers.
administrators, our teachers, that sort of thing. I hear what you're saying about the request to report, the results of some of our tracking and things like that to the board. I'm just wondering if it fits appropriately in the instructional expectations document.
Yeah.
I just throw that out there for your consideration.
Well, I have given it thought, and I know over my last 3 years, I've requested in a variety of different ways, and even in like the evaluation process and things of that nature, we have requested, and it never seems to get to us. So yes, I do think, I mean, that is our job as the school board, is to ensure ultimately that the children in this community are being educated. So if this document is about holding everybody accountable at every level, it does feel appropriate to me to include it in there.
As we worked with this document, and we discussed at the January meeting when we added the instructional resource team as kind of the division role in the instructional expectations, what if we had a section for the school board role at the bottom of it for instructional expectations? And then that goes all the way up from the classroom all the way up to the board level. And if that's the case, I understand you wouldn't vote on it tonight. We would make that amendment and I would bring it back to you at the first March meeting or whenever you would like to see it. I mean, that's just to me, that sort of makes the naturally logical flow all the way from the classroom to the board.
Yes, I think that sounds like a perfect plan.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we do need to know, we don't hear a lot about how the students are doing. We hear, once a year with the SOLs, and sometimes we hear it later after it's happened. So just the more frequently we can hear about how everyone's doing, for better or for worse, just to know, it'd be beneficial to us, I believe.
Maybe since it's an instructional expectations document and you just mentioned sort of the cycle for adoption of textbooks and that, like, maybe that would be under school board as well, like
I
what your
agree.
expectations, the county expects us to
be able to provide
be
those
able to
curriculum
provide it.
resources. That, I think that's absolutely.
Ms. Bragg, are you under any kind of like time constraint with this? Like, does this mess you up to put it off another session, or that's not a concern?
It's not a concern.
We actually discussed this being fully implemented
at the start of
next year. Give everybody some time to look over it, get acclimated to it. But you don't want to throw this right now. You're in the middle of a semester, so it's wait till the end of the year. We're just going through this process, getting things ready for next year as we're preparing also to not just end this year, but preparing for next year as well.
And I definitely see this document as something that will have to come,
Yes.
consistently before the board on a yearly basis because the textbooks may change, those sort, I mean, it's something that's going to have to be updated. It's not a static document.
Yes, it would be something.
Live working.
It would be something that I would request for the board to approve every year. That way it stays front and center. These are the expectations, and so this is what we expect.
And I can add approval of this document to the list at the bottom of the school board's responsibilities.
Perfect. Put it all in there.
And I think, when you look at, presentations, because we do give the instructional presentations and things of that nature, maybe we need to look at to see if there's any additional data that we may need to add, because I think we do two instructional updates. Have we done 2 instructional updates in a year typically?
Well, we typically have like the sort of projected of where we think we're going to be, where the SOL comes in, and then what we do as part of the comprehensive plans. I mean, it's
We can look at the
happening several
calendar
times
and
a
see if there
year.
needs to be something a little more spread out to where we can say, okay, this is where we're at. We'll look at that. No problem.
So this is a new document?
This would be a new
Yes.
document.
And
yes.
how many in the subject matter, how new is all of it? Regarding, we need the bolded parts about the.
As far as the curriculum
Yeah, the
goes?
curriculum, the books or whatever.
So some of it is relatively new, like if you look under elementary English, if you look at the second and the third bullet, like specifically the U-Fly, that was new this year as a division-wide purchase and a required content because of the enactment of the Virginia Literacy Act. However, our HMH Into Reading book was purchased in 2020 for elementary. So that piece of it, not new, and, has been part of our curriculum guides and things like that for some time. So, that's not new. As far as, CIP, we've been a member of CIP since Dr. Ballinger came to the division in 2020. So, the resources that they have been around, for several years. We do have, for example, at high school, if you look, I think it's at the top of the last page. The environmental science book was a relatively new purchase. We had a little bit of leftover money in the textbook fund, not something that would afford a K-12 purchase, but we could sort of fill some holes that way. Same goes for the French book. The French and the Spanish book weren't bought, at the same time. And so I will say that we have posted those textbook and curriculum resources on the website, and those have all the purchase dates of all the curriculum that's listed in this document, just as a cross-reference.
Yeah, that's great. Have you, since this is something new, you've talked to the principals about how the reception's going to be? is any, they see any, like, well, it's gonna be this problem, or?
No, so we did bring this to our principal's meeting.
Yep.
and
Before we brought it to the board in January, so
Before we
they've had
brought
it
it
for a
to
while.
you guys to look at. And then we did solicit feedback from our administrators at our schools, and they did give us recommendations on some things. And so I know Heather and her team reviewed that. And so it's been an open dialogue with
Okay.
our administrators throughout the construction of this.
And it's been, posted on the agendas, that sort of thing. I haven't received any direct feedback
Okay.
from that, staff members. It really is a new document, but it's not a new concept. This has all been in our pacing guides that have been, established. And those, just like this document, are something we review every year and make adjustments to. But what teachers see, in this document, it should not be new news. It's just a new format.
Presentation.
Yep.
And could we please, since this is going to be implemented for next year, can we please make an agreement that we'll have our curriculum information on our website by that time, so that, because we can avoid issues if parents have something to follow along with as well. We really need to.
I think that I just need to understand, again, exactly what the board is looking to have posted, because sometimes I think that we're talking kind of past one another. And so it would just be, I would definitely agree to the conversation of, like, what exactly are the expectations of the board to have posted to the website? So, like, when we say, is the curriculum posted to the website? Yes, the standards have been posted there. That is the curriculum. The textbooks. At Mr. McFadden's, leadership, we have posted, all the textbooks in one document. You don't have to go to, a bunch of different places. If there's something more as far as, our pacing guides or something like that, I would like to have that discussion, and so that I understand exactly what the board's looking for, because mind reading I'm not
Yeah.
solid at.
I
But,
understand.
would that be, if that's amenable?
Yeah,
But
I would like to be more
absolutely,
detailed.
I just want to be clear as to what it is we're asking for.
The overall, yes, for sure, we can have further conversations.
Yeah.
My big thing is that if someone wants to say, what do they do in first grade?
Uh-huh.
One-stop shop, here, click on first grade, here's the books they use in English, here's sort of the concepts they're going to learn over the course of the month or the year in English. Just every
Yep.
sort of, if you're a parent and you're like, what do they do in Warren County Public Schools? You want to be able to look at it and see, and instead of looking at different documents, it's sometimes harder to navigate. You want to make it as easy as possible to not get lost.
Yeah.
And so a place that just talks about, I understand curriculum means a specific thing to you, and it's different from what I think of it, so that's my fault on that. But
No,
to
you're
be able to
fine.
have, what are you going to learn in first grade?
And what I hear you saying is a user-friendly, truncated version of the standards of learning.
Yes, it doesn't have to be all the ins and
That's-
outs. We don't
yeah.
need, no one has to have a PhD in it. You just,
Sure.
for a parent to just say, what's my kid going to learn, so they can have an idea of what to expect.
Sure, absolutely. That I understand. Thank
Okay,
you for
great.
Thank you for
Sorry,
clarifying
sorry.
that. Because, when you live and breathe this,
Yeah.
things do start to mean different things, and it is more than just semantics, because
Right.
we end up talking past each other when we actually agree. Yeah, that I understand.
Thank you.
Can I also ask something Mrs. Salen said made me think of it, but could we also just add on here, and maybe we're already going to do this, but whenever we do vote on it and approve it, can we have the date on there, just so that we do
sure.
know?
Yep.
It drives me crazy when you're looking at something online, and it's like, I
Understood.
don't know if this was written 10 years ago, like, so.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We should probably actually put the date at the top, and that way it's for that fiscal year.
Yeah.
That way we know that this is the most current, up-to-date one.
Absolutely. Okay. Anything else on instructional expectations that I can answer? All right.
Thank you, Ms. Bragg.
Thank you.
I'll bring it back around. Thank you.
Next up this evening, we have the 24-25 calendar change. Is there anyone here this evening that would like to speak on that? Dr. Costner.
Madam Chair, board members, as you're aware, the weather has been very unique this year, and it's created some challenges, and so we've also tried to help make sure that we get instructional time. We've tried to come up with some ways to get our students into the classroom. So Our current 2024-25 calendar had Thursday, February 13th as a half day for students and as a full day for staff. So due to the excessive number of inclement weather days we had, and the loss of instructional hours, we're recommending that we revise February 13th to a full day. And I know February 13th is already come and gone, and we were able to do that as a full day, but we do want to make sure we get it corrected on the calendar and make sure we can move forward. So I do move that the Warren County School Board revises the 2024-25 school calendar reflect that Thursday, February 13th, 2025 as a full day for students and staff.
Any questions for Dr. Costner?
I have a couple of questions. So on the color-coded version, in the middle, navy, it says weather makeup dates. There are no days built into the calendar for weather. I mean, I'm okay with the February 13th thing, but if we're going to be approving, I just need to ask some other question, if that's okay.
You can ask as
So-
much as you like, Mr. McFadden.
There are no days built in for calendar for weather, but we sort of do. So I think that causes some
block
people
hours.
some
Right.
problems. So
And I think we talked about this with the other calendar about how there are days, but they're not necessarily days, they're used as clock hours, so I understand that, yeah.
I mean, for people reading it, they're like, why don't they add them to it? And then secondly, there's been some confusion from some people on the bottom right box where it says makeup days as needed. Some people just see that there's these inclement weather days, but they didn't sort of see the makeup days as needed. And so they're kind of like, wow, we have to do these things. Obviously, we decided when we talked about that, we would only use them if we actually had to use them. We don't want to use them at all.
Right.
But I think in the population, there's some confusion as to, like, oh, they just added these days.
Right.
So we haven't really added the days. We add them as possible days, but we won't know that until much later on.
Yes, sir, and you are correct, and I do appreciate the clarification in coming in and working on the calendar for this upcoming school year. We have taken that information, and we'll get to that in a couple of words. But if you would like for this to be cleaned up, to change to, I could look at trying to revise it. It would require me to bring it back to you again as a revision of where it's been cleaned up and changed this current school year. Next year, moving forward, it has been cleaned up,
Okay.
I hope. We'll have the third reading, but it has been cleaned up moving forward.
Yeah, and my recommendation is that we just get through with this calendar this year. If everybody has already, or if you have not been checking your phone, we're already on a 2-hour delay tomorrow. So we went from having 0 hours to -2. So now we have to think of a way to, whether we're going to have the discussion at some point later on, use those state of emergency days and ask for forgiveness of those. So we will have that conversation later on, or use those days that are listed in the calendar. So that would have to be something that we will have another discussion on, because now we're -2 hours with our school year.
Regarding the emergency days, do we know for sure, it seems like we've talked about this a couple times before, about how we can get exemptions from, saying, hey, it was a state of emergency. I know the ruling says you have to have proven that you've done your very best to make up the days. What does that actually mean? Have we done our very best?
I think that's subjective, and we did make an attempt. We did at least do 2 days.
Yeah.
So we have made up 2 days.
We did remote learning.
And we've done remote learning. So I mean, we have tried to do some stuff. And so I think that would fall upon, and Dr. Coons is the one that approves that. And so, if she has other additional questions, or they may send it back and say, yeah, no, you got to look at some other days, or they may approve it.
Did we already send something into them?
No, we have not
Okay.
yet. We have not yet, because we were waiting. I've been waiting to see, because I didn't want to have to send 2 or 3 of them in. If I sent one in for the last emergency days, and then Aaron tells me we're out next week for some more snow or something of that nature, then I have to send another one in. I'm kind of waiting to hopefully clear through all this, then just do it all at once.
Okay.
But we will have another discussion about this calendar, because now we're starting with on a 2-hour delay tomorrow, which takes us negative.
I think now we can feel good if we need to try to do an application for a waiver, though, because we have done that.
Yeah.
And we did the change, that hopefully we're going to approve tonight, since we already did it last week.
Right.
But we did make that adjustment as well to make up for that
Yes,
2-hour
ma'am.
delay that we ended up doing.
And I cannot, in good conscience, if we have not tried to make up days, to say that we did, and then me sign it and ask for the board or the board chair to also sign that, I just can't do that in good conscience. So I think that we have made our attempt, or at least we've made a attempt. But I will tell you, there are some things that I am concerned about that, if we go for giving too many days, each day we've missed, that's a day of learning. That's a day of new content. That's a day of how is that going to affect that student on their SOL, at the end of the year. So then what would accreditation look like? I mean, there's a lot of other things that play into this that we're going to have to discuss and we're going to have to look into.
Well, my concern is looking at, we still have this May 23rd, 27, 28, 29, 30. That's after SOLs. And I don't know what the turnaround time is on asking for forgiveness for what legitimately was a state of emergency. But people need to be able to have the time to plan for, there are a lot of people who are planning vacations, and to leave that up in the air is problematic. So do we need to be considering things like, if we're going by hours, adding time to the school day instead of having to extend the school year and then take the hit when, quite frankly, I don't think anybody's going to come after Memorial Day, and it's, like it said, it doesn't help with the SOL situation.
So here's the thing. You can push SOL. So SOLs go all the way through mid-June. Is that correct, Ms. Bragg? The window? Yeah, the window for testing. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So if our window, if we were going to test, say, the first week in May, and we wanted to add that, we could push it down to the second week of May, or even we could push it to the third week of May, and then coming back after, if we had to, after that holiday, that's when retakes occur. So then you're doing retakes during that last week of school. So you can extend and push those back to try to get more instructional days in, so and push your testing window back so that you're exposing those students to that new curriculum, or to the standards and new content, but also at the same time giving teachers to do those spiral reviews and remediation. So there's a lot that plays into preparing students for a test, and I think we just need to be cognizant of are we making a good decision for our students. Now, as far as when it comes to a calendar, we're going to work on this, and our goal would be to have kind of a final, hopefully a draft, if we're going to ask for the forgiveness by the first meeting in March, or at least at the latest, the March work session. Because I agree, we've got to give them some time to say, we need to add these days in. So we will probably put something on the agenda for maybe a discussion at the next meeting in March, so that we're looking through that. So hopefully, and sometimes in March you do get a big snowstorm. And the way this year's turning out, I'm not going to say that we're not going to get it, but.
So should we have that SOL moving conversation now? Should we be talking about pushing the SOL back now, so we have a more solid plan in place? I'm just not a very good wait and see kind of girl.
Sounds like that's what you're talking about for March, perhaps?
Yes. Because I want to pull.
A few more weeks.
I want to pull my staff in, and that gives us a couple extra weeks as we start moving from winter into spring, to kind of see what some weather is doing. So just a couple extra weeks can have a big impact on our decision. So, and we would also like to look at it and possibly have maybe a couple of solutions, and give the goods and the bad when it comes to it. So I think there's a lot to go into that. And also, I want my decision makers with my administrators, my principals, to be involved in that and get their input, because they're the ones that's having those data meetings with their teachers on a regular basis, and they understand where their students are, and I know our principals want to make sure that our students are prepared. So I want to get their input on what they feel as well, not just go ahead and have that discussion now. So there's more discussion that we need to have.
Okay. Anything else for Dr. Costner? Is there a motion?
I move that the Warren County School Board revises the 24-25 school calendar to reflect Thursday, February 13th, 2025 as a full day for students and staff.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any additional discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair, when we voted on this calendar last time, I did not realize that we were voting to add all of those days after Memorial Day as leaving it open for discussion without it coming back to the board. Am I understanding this correctly, that the way that this appears on the calendar right now, those days after Memorial Day can now be added to the school year without a vote from this board?
No, I think
That
we
is
talked
not
about
correct.
adding
That
Yeah,
is
we
not
talked about
correct.
That is not
zoning.
correct.
Okay.
Any calendar change comes to the board, and those say if needed. So I will not just say we're now going to school on those days.
Okay.
That will be something that is brought to the board to make that decision on if those days are to be added to the calendar.
Yeah, I think we talked about just
Yeah.
marking them so that people would know if
Have
we
it in their
did, where would they be,
Okay.
they
Yeah.
can start to plan.
Okay, that was what I thought we had, that's what I thought I had voted in favor of. And then when I saw it come up on this calendar, it was my interpretation, oh my goodness, we abdicated our role as having a say in that later. So as long as we're agreed that these days after Memorial Day will not be added without a vote from this board, then I can get on board with this vote.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no? Thank you, Dr. Costner. Next up, we have a ground services contract for 25-26. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to speak on that this evening? Dr. Costner.
Madam Chair, thank you. Tonight, what I bring for you is a question that we're seeking about our ground service. And I just kind of want to give you a little bit of background information on the reason this is coming in this direction. Back in 2024, and this is actually on March the 8th, the board voted to give the bid to a ground maintenance service. And because it was actually Law Enforcement LLC, the board voted to give them the bid. Their bid, they went through the entire process. And as you can see in the executive folders, that there's some information there that shows why the bid was allowed. Within the contract that was signed, the contract said that actually the person can make a request, as it says, in reference to the contract, the price increase more, they can make a request to increase their contract price that's listed in the Consumer Price Index, which is about 3%. The company has come forth, following the contract's procedures, and saying that they want to increase their, they need an increase of $10,780. That is more than the 3%, okay? So with that said, what I've done is I looked at the prior bids. I applied a 3% increase to the prior bids. And just for your information, still with this increase of $10,780 that this services was requesting, it's still the lowest bid, or it's still the lowest amount based on the 3% increase that this would be allowed within the contract. Now, if the board would like for us to take it back and put it back out to bids, we can. That's what happened prior. The company prior to the one that was issued on March 8th, 2024, was put back out to bids, and a different company did bid to where it could come to that. So right now, we're wanting to follow the contract. We feel that this is the best price that we can get at this time based on the information we have, based on prior bids, based on prior years. And so that's why we come to you just as requesting them to have to the amount of $70,000. Actually, the motion is I move that Warren County School Board approves the renewal of the contract with Law Enforcement LLC in the amount of $70,000 for ground maintenance services, and authorizes the superintendent to execute the contract.
I assume since you're recommending them again, we were happy with their services?
Yes, ma'am.
I see Mr.
We're
Helmick,
very
definitely.
pleased, Mr. Helmick.
Okay. Okay.
Very much.
Okay.
And there's still, the contract is more than was $82,000, if you remember, they came out of Richmond, and they wanted a $20,000 increase to come back. So
Right.
they're
a lot of ground to cover too. It's a lot of ground to cover too, that they're having to take care of.
Have we tried to counter them? Have we tried countering them and saying 65,000?
I sort of, I told him I did not think that that would work, but we'd have to take it to the board. And he did say if the board had any other recommendations to come back to them.
Here's another thought. So, you don't want to have to say, I mean, they're jumping the gun a whole bunch of money this year. I mean, obviously, the story from last time was that they were coming back and forth in Richmond, and they were losing their shirts and not making any money, and that was the end, right? That was the last people. Yeah. So these people figured out, well, they came in the low bid, and maybe they're hurting, maybe it's not really making them money. So we have to pay by having an increase. We have 3 more years left in this possible contract to renegotiate. Maybe we say, let's go 70,000 this year, but then we guarantee, and there's 3%, it's either locked in or 3% only for the next 3 years, and just like, sorry, that's what we're doing. Because I mean, if people just say, yeah, shoot, I made the wrong, I gave you the wrong bid, it's like, well, sorry, that's life.
He was straightforward with me. He said I underbid, so I didn't make a penny, which of course he would say that, but I really didn't.
Yeah.
We didn't know how he could do it this price.
But since he's done such a great job and we seem to like them, it's like, well, what can we meet in the middle? Yeah, if he do 65 this year, is he going to put us over the barrel next year and say, I need 75? Or can we say 70 this year, but we're just doing 3% the next 3 years, so get over it? I mean, that's an idea.
That idea is, and that's perfectly fine. And then at any point in time, if they come back and say, well, we need 85 or 90, then we say, we're going out for bids.
Right.
At any point, we could go out and rebid it. So I think that's always something that we keep in our hip pocket. But I don't have any issues with saying, okay, yes, let's do 70, and we're not going to go above 3% moving forward for the next 3 years or whatever. That's fine with me.
Yeah, and if they say that they needed 90,000 the next year, then they know they're out of the contract, and we rebid it. Right. And then we move forward with whatever bids we have. We can do that for sure.
Yeah, so a 3% increase would have only been $1,776.60.
Yeah, but they're nowhere near these other.
Yeah, I get it, that's
Recalibrating,
a tiny amount. Going up to a flat 65,000 would be a $5,780 increase, so but it's still a substantial percentage rate of increase. When you go back and speak to this company, if you can let them know, I'm not a fan of people not honoring their contracts, and that just really rubs me the wrong way and doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy about handing over gifts of an extra $10,000, especially when we're in a budget season that's this tight. The only reason I would even consider it is because you are telling us that they're doing a great job. I personally would still like to at least attempt the conversation of, we'll meet in the middle at 65,000.
Let me ask you, so you said staying to their contract. I mean, the contract was just 1 year with an option for 4 more years.
Right.
So when they said we're doing the option for $59,220, they did honor their contract.
Yeah.
They honor the thing. Was there ever a discussion during those times of, well, what's it going to be next year? Was there discussion? When you were doing this last year, was there any discussion of, are you going to charge the same next year? Or was there any discussion of where it's going to go?
No, but it's in the contract that they can request a renewal up to 3% based on it's based on the consumer price index. And so that's what it states in the contract. That's as much as they can ask for an increase. So we could just, if the board wishes, say that that's not within the contract, and we send it all out to rebid again. We could do that.
I don't think that would be wise.
So let me ask you this: what if we agreed to the 70,000, but can we do a 2-year contract? Can we lock them in and say, hey, this is a ridiculously large
So I
jump,
will.
but we want 2 years?
So I think, one, multi-year contracts for school boards, I think Rob and I would both say that that's not a good idea because you are allocating funds for a next fiscal year that you may not have. So if you lock in that, that's why you see schools typically do or a yearly contract with an option for an additional contract. And plus you're also obligating, say for instance, there's board members that change. So now you're obligating other board members to a contract that they didn't have a say in. And so I think that we have to be cognizant that in 2 years, we don't know what our budget's going to be or what we're going to be asking for, what the economic climate may be. And I would just caution the board on doing a 2-year contract. I would just highly caution that. Rob, would you have anything you'd want to add to that?
Well, I was just going to say, if you do a 2-year contract, it is required that you put an appropriation clause in, because you're committing funds out to a year that you don't have an appropriation for, so you can't legally bind the board to that. But if you put a clause in, and we lease copiers for 3 years, and those have a fixed price over the 3 years, but in each of those, we have that appropriation clause saying that the contract's null and void if sufficient funds are not appropriated to the school board to fulfill their obligation.
Okay. And that would make sense,
Yeah.
because a school has to have a copier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have to have our grass cut.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So we could do a similar scenario.
Yeah, well, I mean,
right?
yes, and thanks for reminding me of that, Rob. I did
Yes.
forget about the appropriation clause that we do put in a lot of things, but yes, I mean, we could do that, but again, I just caution, I always caution about doing multi-year contracts. It's just something that can get you in a bind on down the road, and but if that's the will of the board, then we'll do that. Again, we do it with a lot of other things, and I don't have a problem with it if that's what the direction the board wants to go. But again, I would recommend that we do that 70 from what I've heard and what I've seen and the experience and the reports that I've received from Mr. Helmick. This group has done a bang-up job, and it's probably well worth what we're paying for it.
My biggest fear is if we go out for bid again, we're going to pay lots of it.
Yeah. So what does the board recommend as far as, do we want to do, I think what Mr. McFadden was talking about, either a 70 and plus a guarantee that there's not a 3-year? Do we want to do kind of what Ms. Salins is talking about with, a 2-year contract at locking in 70 for those 2 years with an appropriation clause, or is there another suggestion from the board?
Mr. Helmick looks like he has something he wants to say.
He says they can do 67.
Look at you, deal maker.
Negotiation.
Okay, 65.
I'm glad they're watching this.
Well, and that shows their willingness to
Yeah.
want to
Work with us.
continue
That's
to
true.
work
That's a
with
good
us.
point.
I mean, I think it sounds like it's a great, contract company that we're going with.
Small business.
It's it is, it's a small business.
Mhm.
From my home state, West Virginia. It looks like they come from West Virginia. But it's a small business, but I certainly don't know them at all. But I feel like that's
Yeah.
That's good. 67
Yeah.
sounds fair. I love negotiations.
Modify the motion to 60,
Yep, yes, please.
67.
with the.
With an understanding that
With an
the-
understanding, I was going to
It's
say.
going to be
with
3%,
no more than
the
three-
rest of the,
67 with an understanding that they can only do a 3% increase.
yes,
So,
yes.
yeah.
It's good, that's good.
All right, is there a motion?
I move that the Warren County School Board approves the renewal of the contract with Law Enforcement LLC in the amount of $67,000 with the agreement of 3% increases for the next 2 years
The remainder of the
for
contract.
ground maintenance services, and authorizes the superintendent to execute the contract.
Is there a second?
I think we
Yeah.
said the next 3 years.
Was
It's
it
a
three-
it's a
was it
fi-
3
total of
years?
5 years. We have.
I would just do for the remainder of the contract.
well,
For the remainder of the
okay,
contract.
sorry.
Okay, let me amend the motion. I move that the Warren County School Board approves the renewal of the contract with Law Enforcement LLC in the amount of $67,000 with the understanding that increases for the remainder of the contract will not exceed 3% for ground maintenance services and authorizes the superintendent to execute the contract. Does that sound sufficient?
3% each year.
3% each year.
3% each year.
Yeah, yeah, I
For
would
the
say
duration
add
of the
year.
contract.
I second it.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you, Dr. Costner.
And
Thank you.
Mr. Helmick.
And Mr. Helmick, yes, thank you.
Thanks for watching on TV.
All right, next up this evening, we have our second reading of our second quarter of policy revisions. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak on those this evening? Okay, Dr. Costner.
Madam Chair, thank you. As you know, our school board policy subcommittee has submitted these policies, policy DLB, DLC, DM, DO, EA, EBAA, EBBA, EBCBA, EBCD, and ECA. This is the second reading. There's no motion necessary because this is the second reading, but are there any suggestions, deletions, corrections that need to be made on these policies?
And I'll just reiterate, and certainly Tom, step in if I've missed anything, but these did not have major revisions. It was more just like cleaning things up, adding citations. So there wasn't any major change that I noticed.
I think probably the attachments list is the one that's wrong, but I just want to make sure in our attachments list, it has the third one from the bottom, the electronic room partitions is EBCA, but then it's actually titled EBCBA.
Yes, ma'am. It is EBCBA.
I thought
Yes,
that's what
ma'am.
you had said,
The
but
B was
it's-
left out. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
okay.
Yes, ma'am. That is correct.
Okay, yeah.
It
Any
will be added
questions
for the third reading.
for Dr. Costner on this? And you'll bring them up next month, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. And next, we have the third reading of the 25-26 school calendar. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on that this evening? Dr. Costner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Board members, as you know, we've had a good, sound educational discussion on our school calendar. The following recommendations were made to adjust the school calendar to where that January the 19th, February the 16th, and March 13th and March 16th were identified as snow makeup days if needed. And that's how they'll be classified as needed, but also was included in the document to where it says that 60 extra clock hours are built into the calendar to be utilized for inclement weather. In the event that all 60 clock hours are used, January 19th, February 16th, March 13th, and March 16th will be used as snow makeup days as needed.
I think that's much more clear. That's what we were just getting tangled up with on the last calendar.
And then in that event, each of those days, if you were to need to use them, it would come back to the board for
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It would come
approval
back to
in
the
each
board.
instance. Or
Right.
if you did two or whatever.
Because one of the, yes, ma'am, it would come back to the board.
I just wanted to comment, I don't think I said this last time, but I appreciate the updated format that you all have used this year. I never minded the other format with the big spreadsheet, but I know I've heard from a lot of people who found it confusing, and so I think using these like traditional calendar months is a lot clearer for a lot of people, so I
Thank
appreciate
you.
that.
Thank you.
It does take a while
I
getting
agree.
used to that.
It is
Yeah,
much
that's,
more
yeah.
user-friendly.
I'm still
Not
getting
everyone's
used.
brain works that
Yeah.
way.
Any additional questions for Dr. Costner on this?
So we still haven't figured out a way to not extend past Memorial Day.
So we did have that discussion, and we talked about how would we list or what would we list. If you remove those days, then you're removing hours off those 60 clock hours. So the thing is that if we can look at that and then in April see where we're at, and then see where we're at with our hours or what other days we've had to make up, and then make a decision on that at that point in time. If you take them out of your calendar now, then you're losing those days off of your 60 clock hours, which I will tell you may just want to go ahead and move some of those other days that are off and go ahead and make them days in session just in case. I mean, it just gets a little tight.
But we do have 4 days identified in this calendar that we could
Yes,
add
ma'am.
to it if we need to, which is another 24 hours.
Yes, ma'am.
And then if we find that we're still doing well, we can
You can
vote to
axe
knock
those days at
off.
the end. Yes, ma'am.
Those unencumbered planning days,
Mhm.
right?
Well, I'm talking about the days after Memorial Day. If it
Yes,
turns
ma'am.
out that we don't have any snow and
Right.
Yeah.
tropical winter, we can.
Yeah.
Yes, if we had a year like we did last year we were hardly out at all, then hit March, we can just say we're moving the last day to the 22nd and
And
modify the calendar.
we can always have a calendar discussion during the work sessions, like in February, just to see where we are. I mean, we could back it up to January. I don't know. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. I know there's a county that was out of school because a water line broke and flooded half the area, and so they were out of school for a while. So it's just not snow that can impact. So we can have calendar. I mean, it's fine to have a calendar discussion. Where are we? Things haven't changed. We've used 10 hours. We've used 6 hours, so that we can keep this as an ongoing process in front of us to make sure that everyone's aware that we can, so moving forward, so they can plan appropriately.
So looking at October 16th and 17th with the parent-teacher conferences split between, and we have, I want to make sure I'm understanding this right. So the 17th is no school,
That's correct.
correct? And the 16th, is that 16th is a full day?
The full day for students and staff,
Okay.
yes, ma'am.
So
And
they
then
have their half day on the 17th. And I understand, like, conferences take it out of you, but then you do have the full weekend and the half day. So if that Monday off, that October 20th,
Yes,
if we
ma'am, that's-
sacrificed that, we could potentially be one day closer to not extending past Memorial Day.
Well, and I understand, but I do want to let you know, those unencumbered planning days were requests of teachers. So that's why we've put those unencumbered planning days in there, because they have requested that through
Right.
the
Calendar
meetings
committee.
with Dr. Costner. And so I would recommend that we try to protect those, because that's coming from the staff.
So I know that you said that, but that's just not the feedback that I've gotten about it at all. From what I've been told is that most of the conferences are happening with the elementary school students, and that in high school, parents just aren't really doing them. And that if it meant that they had to sacrifice that Monday off to have no days after Memorial Day, they'd rather that. So, I mean, I get that the survey didn't go out to everybody, and that's a shame. So we're all hearing different things, but and it can be a difference of opinion. I am not a fan of after Memorial Day.
Any other questions for Dr. Costner? Is there a motion on this calendar?
I move that the Warren County School Board approve the 25-26 division calendar as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion on this? Just because this seems like a good place to say it, we did talk about next year when the calendar committee starts to talk, there will be some sort of universal survey that can be distributed to each
Yes, ma'am.
school.
Yes, ma'am. We'll implement that. This year it was the schools, they went back to the schools and disseminated it from the schools. And we allowed them to utilize it the way they see it best fit. But yes, ma'am, we'll come up with a uniform form to send out to gather their feedback
Okay.
and get that.
That sounds good.
Now, whether they submit it, that's up to them.
Sure, of course. Okay. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no?
No.
Thank you, Dr. Costner.
Thank you.
All right, moving into the work session this evening, Dr. Ballinger, your proposed budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're going to get to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and that's funds. Yeah, if you don't mind.
Funds.
I am passionate about school finance. I love school finance, and so I enjoy any time I get an opportunity to talk about school finance. And so, in our presentation tonight, I'm also going to be soliciting the support from some of my team members. So there'll be some different slides that you're going to have some different speakers on. This way we can, this is a group effort throughout our development of our budget. So I also do want to thank the Budget Committee for the work that they've put in and the discussions that we have had concerning our budget. And I know we have another Budget Committee meeting coming up here. Is it next week or week after? I'd have to look back at the calendar, but.
I think it's the 4th, March,
Okay.
maybe.
So, yeah, so we have another one coming up here pretty soon. We'll be talking more, just kind of seeing where we're at, and hopefully we'll know a little bit more with the state budget. So, all right. So Virginia Code outlines that it is the duty of the division superintendent to prepare, with the approval of the school board, the estimate of amount of money deemed to be needed during the next fiscal year for the support of public schools of the school division. This budget is a needs-based budget that is student-focused, is responsive to our collective needs now and into the future, and is in alignment with the school division strategic plan, goals, beliefs, mission, and vision. So when we look at our why, we need to understand that we are here to serve our students. We are here to serve our school community. And Warren County Public Schools, we exist because of our community. Educational institutions, I believe, are service organizations. And so we do provide that service to our community on a daily basis. And we need to keep our students center of all of our decisions that we make every single day, from the teacher all the way up to the board. And as long as we stay student focused, then we know we're always making the correct decisions on a daily basis. So our budget development process, as you can see, there's a lot that goes into it. We have everything from our cost centers. We send out a request typically in October, or actually send out the documents to our cost centers in October, to where I'm going to stand up a little bit so I can just move around. So we send out information to our cost centers so that they can help develop their site budgets. That could looking at staffing, looking at non-labor. Also, we review our strategic plan. We also, at that same time, review data such as enrollment. We review where we are with numbers in classrooms, class sizes, numbers when it comes to our special education department. We also look at school board priorities. We look at those staffing needs and projections that I just talked about, capital improvement plan or capital plans. School board budget committee, when we discuss and we look through everything that's presented, we kind of work through some things. And also when we look at our cost centers, they present our budgets to the executive budget committee, and then the executive budget committee reviews all requests, and we kind of formulate some things. As far as our timeline, this is a long process. It starts in October and it goes all the way until we have a budget approved. I think 2 years ago it was June 29th, when we approved one. That's typically too late. But you can see that information is sent, again, kind of what I'm repeating here, that's sent to the cost centers, it's prepared. They present, budget committee reviews, we review categorized priorities, we review the governor's budget. That typically comes out in December, usually around December 20th is when the governor's budget comes out. Then we go through our executive budget committee as we prepare the cost or estimated cost for what we're looking at. We review then the Senate and House bills as they do crossover. We hold a public hearing. Then, of course, I'm doing the proposal tonight just to kind of talk to you. Again, the final will not be until the March meeting for the board to approve. This is just for informational purposes. Then again, we do have the budget. Once it is approved, it's sent to the Board of Supervisors. They do their thing on their end with advertisements, and then they finally come back and give us an appropriation. And at that time, we either adopt a budget or we look at our budget and have to make edits if we have to, or increases where we're at. So also, when we look at our budget development, we do look at our strategic plan. So I have included our strategic plan with our objectives here as part of this presentation. So we have the 6 categories: instruction, climate and culture, family and community, safety and health, technology, and transportation. I'm not going to go through all the objectives, and you know that they are on our website, and I'll touch on some of those as we're going through this presentation. Also, when you look at our goals, these are the goals that are tied into our strategic plan. You know, we do want to make sure that students will graduate from Warren County Public Schools. We want them to be able to think critically, think creatively, communicate effectively, collaborate with others, and be prepared to enter the workforce. And then there's a lot of other ones. You look down at safe and reliable and equitable transportation system. We have technology listed there. We do want to provide an all-inclusive school experience. So there's a lot of different goals that we look at as we're developing our budget. When it comes to budgeting, one of the things that we do have to keep in mind is that the composite index is really what helps drive our budgets. And when you look at the composite index, this determines the local government's ability to pay for education and and for the cost that helps support those standards of learning with local funds. So that a composite index is calculated using 3 criteria. So you have true value of real property, and that's weighted at 50%. Then you also have adjusted gross income weighted at 40%, and then taxable retail sale weighted at 10%. So when you look at the chart up here, you can see that Warren County has the second highest ability to pay out of all of the neighboring communities. So with Clark being at basically 60%. So what this is saying is that in Clark County, their locality should fund 60% or more of their education. Here, they're saying Warren County should 45% or more of the education. And that's really what that's looking at when you're looking at those breakdowns comparisons. Another piece of our budget development is, again, our number of students that we have in our schools. Now, this is a little confusing. So those numbers, you'll see that is 4,851. That is ADM that we're funded on. Now, we did put down at the bottom that we also have 153 students that do attend our schools that are not counted in this funding formula. So we have our pre-K students, and we have our special ed
The regional
regional
assistant.
program students. That adds up to 153. So when you add 153 to the 4,851, I believe that's 5,002, 5,003 students or 4. So we do have other students that are in our buildings that's not counted in that number up there. So you just have to keep that in mind when you're looking at that number. So yes, we are over 5,000. Here's a little bit about your school system. So this is our vision: learning through inspiration, engagement, empowerment, and innovation. Every student, every day. We do want to focus on each student's needs. And we want to make sure that we are meeting their needs on a daily basis. 9 schools, we have 1 technical center and 1 non-traditional education program. Again, over 5,000 students. We have 802 staff members with 591 teaching professionals. They're also within your school system here. We have 63 career technical education courses. We also had, out of those courses, we've had 226 students complete or be completers. We offer 21 dual enrollment courses. And just this last semester, there was over 2,084 credits earned. That was in fall of '24. So just last semester, 2,084 college credits earned. We have 93% on-time graduation rate with 36% of our graduating seniors will have a advanced diploma. We operate 35 bus routes with 7 car routes. We transport over 2,300 students on a daily basis. So when you're looking at that number of 5,000, we're right there transporting just about half of our student population. Also, we drive. We drive over 385,000 miles a year. That's a lot of miles. Now, Warren County, as far as our geographic footprint, is not big, but we transport a lot of students. Also, just some nice interesting facts. Since we've moved to free breakfast and lunch at all of our schools, we serve over 3,100 breakfasts and over 3,300 lunches daily. That's a lot of food. That's also addressing some of those needs to make sure that if families or students are experiencing any insecurities with food insecurities, then they're able to get that at school, without cost. So we are removing some of those barriers to education, because we know that a lot of those students, you can't learn if your belly's sitting there growling. And so being able to have that food available and offer that to our students, it's a plus. Also, just wanted to throw this out there. Over the summer, again, we served over 2,000 meals, breakfast and lunch. So 2,000 breakfast, 2,000 lunch. That's a lot of food that we're providing to our community. So we are a resource here in our community, and we are serving our community. So now I'm going to get into a little bit of the revenue side of things. And again, this is just a bar chart that just shows historically kind of where our state funding has been. So this is looking just at state revenue. And we'll get into the actual numbers later on when we get into our breakdown. But you can see a nice little trend line there. Our local revenue, this is the localities piece. So state revenue is what the state sends us. When you look at the local, that's only what we are getting from the local appropriation from our governing body. So that's what this chart looks at. Our federal, again, this is federal revenue. You see that spike, that's back during COVID, when we received all the CARES funding and other funding for the pandemic. And then our miscellaneous revenue. Miscellaneous revenue, that covers everything from where we take care of the cars for the county. So they pay us for Mr. Mitchell and his team to do that. That's miscellaneous revenue, so that goes in here. When people rent our facilities, that's miscellaneous revenue. So that's how we track that through miscellaneous revenue. So then when we look at our state revenue versus our local revenue, this is just looking at trends and comparing over years how our state revenue versus our local revenue has tracked. And so you can see just on the bar chart, it seems like we're getting a little more state than we are local at this time. I did provide a line chart this time to kind of look at that from a different perspective. I know a lot of people like bar charts, some like line charts. But I would like to note on this chart, if you look at how it has tracked from state revenue versus local revenue, you can see in 2022 that there has been a larger disparity between local revenue and state revenue. As the state revenues continue to increase, our local revenue has not kept up with that pace. And so that's why you're seeing that widen out at the end. I would also like to just talk about a little bit, when we look at our state revenue, it has increased over 41% over the past 5 years, where our local revenue has increased 8% over the past 5 years. Also, when comparing and just looking at this chart where we're last about equal, staying there, and that's 2022. So from FY 2022 to FY 2025, and I'm looking at this section right here, from here forward, so that's what I'm comparing. So just for FY 2022 to FY 2025, our state revenue has increased 23%. where our local revenue during that same time has only increased 3.5%. And so we're seeing that it's causing that a little disparity as far as when we're looking at what we're trying to do and what we can accomplish at the school level. Then we have our debt service. Debt service, that's bonds, again, for buildings. That is a dedicated revenue that the county receives. They pay the bonds, so we don't see any of that money. And then this chart here, it looks at our county revenue versus local funds for operation and debt service. So what this chart does is it takes our operation, because keep in mind, our operation, that's our bread and butter. That's what we need to survive on a daily basis. Debt service, that's not something that we live on. We don't even see that money, but we do include it because that is a cost to our schools. So this chart looks at, if you look at the blue bar, that is our debt service with our operating. Then the orange, that's property taxes, and then the gray, that represents the county's overall revenue for the year. So if you look at 2012, there's a little similarities as far as how far apart those are, but then you can see that as revenues have increased, how property taxes and other taxes that have been received have increased, we're not seeing that big jump with our, for the school systems. Again, this just kind of shows where we're at with our debt service included in our operation, and kind of as we were closer together in 2012, how things have just continued to grow and divide. Now this next slide here, I take out debt service because again, I talked to you that we just live off of our operation. Our operational budget, again, is our bread and butter. That's our daily. That's the salaries, that's our non-labor, that's what we operate on. And so when I remove the debt service and then again just look at operational, you can see a bigger disparity between as we see taxes, more taxes coming in, more revenues coming in. Again, here is a revenue chart. So this looks at county revenue versus local funds for school operation. And again, all this data is just taken from the audits. So we have this data from our audits every year. Mr. Ballantyne has those, and we do pull this information. This is a new slide, and this slide is what we look at here is the percent of the total county budget. So that's the school's percent of the total county budget. And that includes everything. So that's saying how much of the total county budget is the school budget. So that includes our state revenue, that includes our local revenue, that includes everything. Historically, since 2003, Warren County Public Schools has been about 60% or a little over 60%. So it's anywhere between 59.9 to 60 I think 61, 62% is the most that I've seen. But you can see in 22, we dropped down to 52.6% of the total county budget. Then the next year in FY23, we've dropped down to 50.8% of the total county budget. And currently we are setting for this year, with the numbers that we have, we're setting at 49.5% of the total county budget. So that percentage has decreased specifically really over the last 3 years if you look at the trend data. And then again, when you're looking at this slide here, again, it's the local appropriations of the total county budget. So we're looking at how much the county locally appropriates to the schools from their budget. And that's why you're seeing it's at about 25% back in 04, then it kicks up somewhere around 2011, FY11, then it's about 30%. It hovers about 30%, but then again, over the last 3 years, we have seen that, we have noticed that decrease as far as when it comes to what portion of the local appropriations are going to our schools as far as the total county budget. When we look at our salary and incentives or initiatives and personnel, again, the first thing we're gonna do when it comes to our budget, we gotta take care of our people. I know there's a lot of sometimes confusion out there within the community, thinking there's a lot of places to cut. Our workforce is our budget. Our non-labor is a very small portion of our budget. So when you start talking about, hey, we need to cut, you're talking people typically is what you're looking at, and services that are being offered. So we always want to take care of our staff. All employees right now, as far as our initiatives, will receive a 3% increase, at least inclusive of a step. Teachers are going to get a 3% plus a step. That's what we're at least projecting right now. Our instructional assistants, we did a scale adjustment. Bus drivers, we increased to 5 hours and did a scale adjustment. Speech therapists, a scale adjustment. Registered nurses, a scale adjustment. Student support coach, a scale adjustment. VHSL coach scale, and supplemental and miscellaneous scales. Also, some of the other benefits that we have, you guys approved a sick leave payout last year for teachers and instructional assistants. We do have an impact on, impact of probable benefits. What we're looking at for the impact on our health insurance, right now we're figuring that at 10%. So when you see that impact of probable benefits increase of 10%, we are trying to get our number, but they keep telling us it may not be till March till they tell us what our insurance rates are. And we can't control that. So we have to project, and right now we're projecting at 10%. Of course, we have comprehensive health care coverage. We have multiple plans. You can read those. We have employer contributions, though WCPS does cover a significant portion of monthly premiums, which is beneficial to helping us to hire people because insurance costs can be expensive. Again, we have dental and vision benefits along with dual employee discounts. And then we have an SHA, a health savings account. So getting into the salaries a little bit deeper here. On this slide, what we have here is we take every scale, the number of people, and then we are projecting what their salary would be with either the 3% inclusive of the step or 3% plus the step for the teachers. What we have down at the bottom, remember when I talked to you about scale adjustments? So that is to pull that out so you can see what impact that has when we did a scale adjustment. Now, I do want to make note that if we did a scale adjustment, we didn't do a 3% because actually the scale adjustment is typically a little bit more than the 3%. And so they get that because of the scale adjustment. So for instance, if you have, and what I'm talking about with a scale adjustment, if you have 30 years on your scale, we take off the top 2. That means everybody moves down 2, so they're getting 2 steps instead of just getting a step with a 3% increase. So when you remove and take a scale from 30 years experience and you condense it to maybe 25 years or you condense it to 28 years, that moves people up the scale quicker, and then that allows them to get a higher salary range. Again, when you look at this, our total number there is $66,713,464 when it comes to our salaries. And that's with everything that we talked about with our initiatives and with our scale adjustments, with the 10% increase that we are projecting with health insurance. And Rob, I don't think I'm missing anything. Am I on that? Did I cover everything what this sheet covers?
I think that covers it. The amount on the health insurance, that's just the employer's share. The employees pay their share too, so the total cost for health insurance is a large number.
So as far as our initiatives with personnel, we did have some of our held positions last year that we had to hold to make budget meet, to meet our appropriations that we had. So we took those positions and we looked at those, and then we also had from requests from administrators this year to also take into account some of the things that we needed to address as a school division. And so as we went down here, we said, okay, some of our positions we still need. We still need them in those schools. But other of those held positions, we said, hey, we can repurpose those. Because when we looked at, for instance, some schools' class size numbers, and the class size numbers didn't show that we needed that teacher at that elementary level. So therefore, we are repurposing that position and saying, let's do something else with that position. So it's not just adding positions. So we're being cognizant of what positions we have, and we're making sure that we're utilizing our vacant positions to the best of our ability to be fiscally responsible. So for instance, at E. Wilson Morrison, there's still a need for that teacher. You know, we had to hold one of their teachers, their class sizes were up. We know we have a group coming up into a grade that only has 3 teachers. They need that 4th teacher. Otherwise, those numbers are going to be high at E. Wilson Morrison, which is a school that requires, well, our K-3 class size, they're one of our lower schools, so we really keep the numbers down at E. Wilson Morrison. They're also our highest when it comes to our free and reduced lunch count. And so we do need to make sure that when we look at equitable funding, that we're putting our money and the people where it's needed the most. And so we do need to keep that teacher there. Warren County Middle School, and that special education teacher was at E. Wilson Morrison, but in conversations with the administration at E. Wilson Morrison and with special education, we know we have a group coming up into Warren County Middle School next year that's going to increase special education services. And so we don't have that need at E. Wilson, so we're moving that position to Warren County Middle School. So we're not saying that, hey, we're going to keep that position at E. Wilson and add a position at Warren County Middle School. We're repurposing it to another school. HJB, the Tier 3, that stays. We are seeing those numbers there. We feel that position needs to be there. LFK, there was a teacher that we held at LFK this year, a position. It was a vacant position again, remember. Again, looking at numbers, I'm not seeing a trend. I think we're okay. I've talked to the administration at the school again, just looking through where we're at. They feel they're okay as well. So instead of putting a teacher back in, we want to repurpose that into a reading specialist. Because our goal is to get 2 more reading specialists. That way every elementary and every middle school will have a reading specialist to implement VLA. But repurposing that teaching position to a reading specialist, that to us it's a need, but it's also, again, being fiscally responsible. Ressie Jeffries, again, taking that K teacher that we put on hold last year and repurposing it to a physical education teacher. Because we know the specials at Ressie, we need to add specials teachers. And that, when you say specials, it's not special education. Specials are PE, art, music, those positions. So by adding that physical education teacher, that's moving us in that positive direction, because Ressie Jeffries is our 3rd largest school. AS Rhodes, taking that pre-K teacher, and again, we're going to repurpose that to that 2nd reading specialist that we need. So again, it's not adding an additional position, it's just repurposing that held position to meet a current need that we have. The Skyline High School ag teacher, we still need that ag teacher. Right now, we have kids on a wait list. We have kids that want to take that course. They can't take the course because we can only offer so many sections with 1 teacher. So that ag teacher needs to stay in there. And then again, Skyline Middle School teacher and special education teacher, there's still a need there for those. Again, I mentioned about the special education teacher at Warren County Middle School. Same thing at Skyline Middle School. That's why we're going to leave that special education teacher there. But then there's also a need for an English teacher right now at Skyline Middle School, because our numbers are pushing the limits. Standards of quality allows us 24 students per English teacher, 6 through 12, and we're pushing that. We're at 24, 23, 24, 1 or 2 more, and we're too close to to where then we would have to do something in mid-year. So we need to address that now, just because of our numbers. Then we look at our additional positions. Again, Blue Ridge Technical Center, we're asking for a special education teacher division-wide request. So these are additional positions above the held positions. A translator or ELL teacher. Then we also have or need a nursing coordinator, and then we need a public information officer. When we look at our pay grade adjustments, they're, again, and I'll go into this a little more in detail, but we're looking at a software specialist to a technician scale, looking at a dean of students to a principal, increase part-time secretary rate, and then align school counselor coordinator stipend. Retain student support coaches and student support instructional assistants. We'll get into that topic a little bit here later on, but you know, it's important for us to have our student support coaches, and I did reduce that a little bit. So we did have an additional, right now this year, we had an additional 7 positions. You know, trying to be responsive, and if we can get the two reading specialists, and then that way we can have a reading specialist at each school, then that's going to help with running those programs, and I think we could do that with the 8 bachelor and the instructional assistants when it comes to our student support coaches. So let's talk about our justifications. So here's where I'm going to talk about each of those positions that we just mentioned. So our held positions, they are needed to reduce our class size, meet mandated requirements, provide student support. Also, the held positions, when we had to hold them, what did they do? They caused larger class sizes in some cases. Also, it did reduce our ability to provide program offerings, and it reduced our ability to provide specific student supports. And again, I mentioned it here, some held positions have been repurposed or transferred to meet current needs of the school division. When you look at this, there were 6 teachers between elementary and secondary and 3 special education teachers. Again, this aligns with our comprehensive plan, Section 1, Objective 1, Section 1, Objective 3, and Section 1, Objective 4. So they do align with those goals within our strategic plan. Our student support coaches and student support instructional assistants. These positions came through with our CARES money. You know, we have been able to manage over the past 3-4 years since that funding came available to be creative to keep them. Now that money is running out. So these positions have been funded through various grants. They were shifted to focus on one-on-one and small group remediation with the implementation of the VLA this year, so the Virginia Literacy Act. Beginning of the year, VALS testing in grades K-3 found that we had 527 students requiring a reading plan. That's K-3, 527 students. Next year, VLA will include grades 4 through 8. So now it's going to be K-8 VLA. So we're going to need the supports there to help make sure that we are implementing this. Those students that aren't meeting benchmark will also require an intervention plan. So we want to make sure that we're providing that support for one-on-one and small group. And in some of those intensive groups, they limit the size of students that you have or that you can have in there so that you are making progress. And so we need to make sure that we have the hands-on, the staffing available, that we are able to provide that one-on-one small group setting to where we can move our students. Again, that aligns with our comprehensive plan, Section 1, Objective 1. And I did put some data on here just so that you can see how we've progressed just from beginning of the year to mid-year. So when you look at the high risk, our fall numbers, for instance, let's just look at first grade division total. High risk, there was 145 students that were identified at high risk. Mid-year, there's 114. So we've moved some students down to the moderate risk, or maybe some of them have jumped even to the low risk. So that means we're moving students in the right direction. When you look at grade 1 at moderate risk, there was 103 that were identified as moderate risk back in the fall. Now we're down to 77. So we have moved approximately 30 students with small groups, one-on-one, and other things that we're doing, including with the student support coaches and just the reading program that we have with our classroom teachers, some curriculum changes, we're moving our students. Low risk. Now this one's just the opposite of the first two. You want to see this number go up. So if a student's in low risk, you want that number to be higher. That means we don't have to do a plan, or maybe not as intensive plan, but no plan. So if they're low risk, it's no plan. So you want to see a lot of students in that category. So at first grade, when you look at it at the beginning of the year, we had 111 students in low risk. So we had 111 students that did not need a plan. Now we've jumped that up to 168. So we've moved a lot of students in the right direction. And I did want to make note, the asterisks at grade 3, division level totals, we still had 2 schools when we got this data that has not completed all their vals mid-year assessments, and so that data is skewed. It's not complete because we don't have all of our schools presenting their data here. When we look at our reading specialists, 2 reading specialists are needed to effectively implement and provide student support to students on a reading plan and to effectively implement the VLA. Current staffing splits our reading specialists at our schools. By adding 2 reading specialists, all elementary and all middle schools will have a designated reading specialist. You know, we have a vacancy right now, and so we had to adjust this year. So both of our middle school reading specialists are slipping down right now and helping to cover some elementary schools and our middle school, just because we're a little short. But that is not an effective program, and so we want to do what's best practices when it comes to a reading intervention program. And so we are looking at making sure we have those reading specialists, because that way they can help with the implementation and run that reading intervention program within the schools. So it's important when we look at that to make sure our program is solid and that we have the supports there in order to allow students to move from high risk down to low risk. Again, this goes in with Section 1, Objective 1, Section 1 and Objective 3 of our strategic plan. Special education teacher at Blue Ridge Tech. BRTC supports students on an IEP. There's a need for a designated special education teacher who can work with students and staff in the building and help implement and support their IEP requirements. Again, this aligns with our comprehensive plan, Section 1, Objective 1, Section 1, Objective 3. The physical education teacher at Ressy's. RJES is our 3rd largest school. With the number of students served, there is a need to provide additional staffing for specials, PE, art, and music. There is a need for an additional PE teacher for the FY26 to help address this growing need. Again, this aligns with our comprehensive plan, Section 1, Objective 4. Translator, ELL. Again, when you look at this, our numbers have grown. From 2020, we've went from 153 EL students to 256 EL students this year. When you look with this growth, there is a need to support students and families of our EL population. Strong school and home bonds help to ensure student success. Again, this aligns with our comprehensive plan, Section 1, Objective 1, Section 1, Objective 3. Our nursing coordinator that we need. Demands on school nurses are ever changing, and there is a need to have a position able to support and train nurses on a regular basis. This position will help ensure consistent best practices and effective oversight of our nursing program. Again, this aligns with our comprehensive plan, Section 4, Objective 3. Public information officer is needed to ensure that communication and information are current, consistent, and timely across the entire school division. Communication is key component to the school division, and to have a dedicated professional will help us maintain and support the entire school community. So again, that ties into our comprehensive plan, Section 3, Objective 1, Section 3, Objective 2, and Section 3, Objective 3. And then pay grade adjustments. This again is to better align the responsibilities of the job and to improve efficiency while streamlining services across the division. And again, it aligns with our comprehensive plan, Section 1, Objective 2. The next slide we're going to get into is our non-labor. So when we look at our non-labor, one thing that we went through was a Title I audit. And through a Title I audit, they wanted to ensure that we had equitable funding between our schools. And when we looked at it, there were some schools that were receiving this amount versus this amount. And so we aligned that to say, okay, we're going to give a dedicated amount for each school per student, which one, it helps that school to budget for next year so they know exactly what they're going to get. It helps us to budget next year. So what we did is we looked at FY 2015 and we put in what their budgets were back in 2015. So that's 10 years ago. So if you look at Ressie Jeffries back in 2015, their budget was $64,549. In 2025, their budget was $65,897. So in 10 years, their budget had moved up about $300. Ressie Jeffries has been requesting, not just this year, but they've been requesting for the past few years around $75,000 to $85,000 because of the number of students that they have and the number of supports that they have. So we did put their request on there. Now, when we look at this, how we're going to fund per pupil at the elementary, middle, and high schools, Ressie Jeffries would receive about $81,000. So it's not what they requested, but it does move them into where they're at, where they need to be. And you can look down at all the schools. E. Wilson, they moved from $48,000 to $50,000. You can see their request. A.S. Rhodes has moved about $1,000, or not quite $1,000, about $800 over the 10-year period. LFK, they moved about $1,200, $1,300 over that same time period. When we look at our per pupil expense, we wanted to make sure that we are adding growth to it because we know that typically inflation is going to be around 2%. That's what we want to, that's what they're saying. It's 2%. I mean, we were just talking about 3% for our mowing company. But if we're not building 3% into our schools, I can tell you copy paper in 2015 is not what copy paper costs now. So what has happened is our schools' ability, their purchasing power has drastically reduced just because of cost of services, cost of products, and so our principals are having to make decisions on, well, we can't do that because we have to buy this. And so it limits and takes away from the classrooms when we see that our budgets become stagnant over a long time. So building in this, it is a 5-year projection, and over that 5 years, it's only a 5% increase over 5 years. So that's really 1% each year. So for the first year, FY26 and FY27, for instance, elementary would be $125. So this year and next year, we would budget our schools at $125 per student. In FY28 and 29, it jumped up 2%. So it goes from $125 to $128. Then in FY30, and if you expand that out to FY31, it would go up 1%. And so you'd be at $129. So over that 5-year period, you jump up $4 at the elementary level, and then you can see at the middle and high school level. And again, doing this at our schools, you'll see the impact that it does have on the overall non-labor budget. And I believe it's about $80-some thousand, isn't it, Rob?
I think it was 83,000 and some change.
By doing this model versus what is being requested. So when you look at our non-labor funding as far as for our other departments, so this does not include any of the elementary schools. This is all of our departments. Now it does have Blue Ridge Tech and our Alt-Ed in here. I'll just highlight a couple of these. So assistant superintendent, you see that increase of $117,000. That's a projection of 5%. We are going out for bid for our Sodexo contract for janitorial. So we are anticipating an increase. So we are budgeting for that. When you look at technology, $633,000. Again, I'll let Mr. Stefnovsky talk to you more as we get into the justification pages that kind of outlines the increases there. But our costs just continue to rise. And the programs that we're implementing, refresh, again, I don't want to steal any of Mr. Stefnovsky's thunder here. I know he's ready to get up here. Our substitutes, again, you guys just saw that we're up as far as year over year of the number of people that are able to fill spots. So that's good that we're getting subs in the building, but it's bad for the budget because now you're paying more people. So if you go from a fill rate of 71% to a fill rate of 81%, you're paying for that because you only pay when you fill the spots. And so as we see that fill rate go up, that means that cost is going to go up in association with that. Another one on here that I'll point out, $192,000 for instruction. So we also have some leftover all-in tutoring, or what is that one?
All-in Virginia.
All-in Virginia money. So there's about $175,000, I believe, of what we figured. That is the pot that we were paying a majority we were paying all of our student support coaches with. But we do have to buy materials because we're moving BLA to 4 to 8. So we have to buy materials for reading interventions and things of that nature. So that money will be used, but that we already have. So that's an increase there. The negative $666,000, that's where the county is talking about taking over the bond payment for Ressie Jeffries for the renovation. So we are removing that revenue because they have to give us that revenue. It doesn't matter whether we pay it or they pay it, it's got to get paid. So if they're going to pick that up, then they're not going to give us that $666,000 for it when we're not paying it. So we do show that as a decrease there. And then if you look over to the right, you can see that the FY25 approved non-labor budget was 11,542. The proposed non-labor budget per pupil allocation is 11,622. So a difference of 80,000. Then the cost center request, and then just the difference you were looking at is $666,000 when you add it all up. So now we'll get into some justification. So I'm going to ask Mr. Stefnovsky to come up and he can talk about technology.
Dr. Ballinger highlighted that I'm requesting $633,000 increase to technology budget. All of these requests here align to the comprehensive long-range plan for what's Section 5's technology and Objective 3, which is really about making sure we have a robust and secure infrastructure for learning and communicating within our school system. The first part of the request is just having a built-in E-rate match. I know you hear me talk about E-rate a lot. It's really just about providing our internet services and the technology that we need for the equipment for internet service. So when looking at those kind of things, a lot of it is stuff we would have to pay for anyway, and since E-rate provides that discount, I think that would just be good for us to have that built into the budget. The second part of the request is for our phone system upgrade. And really, I could have put the phone system upgrade down into the refresh needs because those two chunks right there are really about just making sure we have funds in there that we can use to buy any of the equipment that we need. In this particular case, when we're talking about the phone system, just to be clear, our phones work. We use Cisco phones, but our phones are way past end of life. So what happens is we don't have any support services. So if our phone systems went down and we could not solve what the problem is, we have a phone system that would not be functioning. So that would, as you can imagine, be a huge security concern for our school system. So this right here is just an estimate. I tried to pick I tried to pick a low estimate so that we could kind of get an idea of what we would need to be able to upgrade to make sure we have a phone system that's functional, start moving towards a system that we can have some longevity with. And then the last part is really just talking about having something else built in there so that we can refresh. Schools are constantly asking for having, new interactive displays or smart boards. We talk about having cameras. So I just listed a whole bunch of things that we just need some funds so that we can kind of have an ability to replenish these things that we need within the school system, and also just to cover the rising costs of services. Typically, things rise. When we're looking at our big three, which is Power School, our firewall, and our content filter, which we have for our students, those things between the years of 2021 and this last school year, just those three alone have risen $40,000. So we've kind of been trying to, as he was talking about with having diminished purchasing power, it's one of those kind of things like we had to cut some other things this year. We're at the point now where there's not really anything else to cut. So I just wanted to highlight those for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stefanoski. Now we'll ask Ms. Bragg for instruction.
Hello. As Dr. Ballinger already sort of pre-briefed, the biggest request for the instruction budget overall about $192,000 increase that we're asking for. Approximately $100,000 of that would go towards the purchase of a universal K-8 screener for both English and math. The purpose of the universal screener is to provide skills-based normed data. It's a nationally normed process, and that gives us a indicator of where our students are on their skills K-8 across the county, to have those common conversations about where our students are and how they are performing. With the VLA, we know that K2 will be required, every student will be required to take the VALS screener. So this is still an approximate cost, because there could potentially be some adjustment. We don't want to over-test the students. If a test is already serving that purpose, we don't want to give them another test. But certainly for grades 3 through 8 and for math, the need to have that understanding of where our kids are, a midterm assessment, and then also a final assessment as far as where they are on skills. Universal screeners oftentimes can uncover some things that even though a student is performing well in the class, they're getting good grades, that sort of thing, but they may have some skill deficits that are sometimes difficult to see in like just the grading of the course. The other piece of the universal screener is that we want the accompanying supplementary piece that allows for that differentiated lesson. It goes that one step further. Continuing to test the students to know that the student has a deficit in a skill in math or English isn't going to move the needle. We need to have those supplementary lessons that point and help direct teachers to how to address that student's needs so that we can fill those gaps. Oftentimes what, especially, as our teaching staff is, either new to the profession or in different modes that we're hiring in, they recognize that the student has a deficit, but their toolkit may just not be large enough to address those deficits in different ways that the student needs. So they're teaching the skills, but it may not be getting that gap filled. So those supplementary lessons can help provide some of that differentiated support in order to meet those students where they are. It also gives us the progress monitoring piece to see that to monitor their growth. So that's the biggest sort of chunk. Dr. Ballinger also mentioned, I'm going to skip textbooks for just a second. Dr. Ballinger also mentioned the carryover from the VLA in order to purchase more supplementary and intervention materials, and that's required by the Virginia Literacy Act that we purchase from the VDOE list those supplementary and intervention materials for grades 4 through 8, which goes into full implementation next school year. The other piece of the increasing cost of services, as was mentioned with technology and paper and some other costs, are continuing purchases each year, our continual contracts they're running approximately 15% more each year. So our Mastery Connect, which is our assessment software for benchmarks, some of the programs that we use to roster our textbooks, things along those sorts of nature, those things along those nature are running about 15% more. Also, we pay the Virtual Virginia bill out of the instruction budget, and that bill has consistently been over $100,000 each year to cover the cost of our Virtual Virginia attendees, and it is on pace to increase about $13,000 this year. So that number continues to grow. Kind of circling back to the textbooks. So for instructional textbooks, there is a separate fund for the textbook fund, and I believe Dr. Ballinger explained that there would be money placed into that line item, but as part of the instructional justification, I just wanted to reiterate the importance of being able to have funds for those textbooks. We are looking at both a math and social studies purchase for next school year. And then Blue Ridge Tech has requested about $20,000 to maintain and replace equipment and services, purchase curriculum aligned to the courses at the Blue Ridge Tech Center in order to keep up with changing standards, programming, that sort of thing. Anything else?
Thank you, Ms. Bragg.
Yep.
And now I would like to invite Ms. Drake up to talk about human resources.
Hello, good evening. So my justification for HR, I'll start with our timekeeping system and maybe start with a little joke that the Flintstones kind of want their chisel back. We are still using a paper system, which is really not effective when you are looking at a timekeeping system and having to track everybody's hours to make sure that we are in compliance with both state, local, and federal law. So having an electronic timekeeping system would be very beneficial to our payroll specialist who has to go through every single paper timesheet. Not saying she makes errors, but it is really open to human error anytime you take a pencil and pen from the employee to the supervisor approving to payroll. So this would streamline that process. It would also help us track accurate hours, and then also we do have an integration fee. It's a one-time fee going from the system into our payroll system. So that way it will just upload. Oh, sorry. There we go. Now you can see what I'm talking about. And then we have Power School. So this is about $60,000, and this is investing in additional capabilities that Power School does have. I think it's important that we already have a system established. It's very user-friendly with our employees. The current evaluation system that we have is not, and so we would like to move forward with the Perform, that's the evaluation system, and then also the professional learning system for development and the online training modules. So we did have Fred Scott and Dr. James Strange, I might be saying his name incorrectly, but they were the engineers and created the system. They came and did a demo. We did have our IR team a part of that to make sure that it was actually comprehensive for them. So we would be able to eliminate a system that we have, which is through another vendor, to be able to use that money towards this as well. So if you're doing any addition from what I'm asking for, it is off because we can use those funds and allocate it towards this. But I think the online training modules are very important. So if we have an employee that's struggling in a specific area, they can go ahead and we can kind of recourse, redevelop them in that specific area, and it's specific to them. We just don't have a lot of those available now outside of maybe an additional cost to have to send them to that. So this is just a great resource if somebody just wants to improve themselves. They can sign up. These classes are a part of that program. All right, and then I get 2 pages. My last company, HR didn't have a budget. Now I do, so it's kind of nice if approved, right? But this is really important to me. So when we look at our strategic plan, and HR really falls under everything, right? Anything that deals with humans, human relations, human resources, right? We are a part of that. And so when you look at our strategic plan to recruit, employ, and retain our employees, right now we tell our candidates coming in that we have chosen to hire, they have to pay $27. They have to bring in cash or a check to pay for their background. I think for a candidate experience, when we are telling them that and they haven't even been board approved to actually start with us, I would like to see us take on that cost. We currently take that cost on for our volunteers right now, so I would love to see, this is an estimate. Hopefully it doesn't go above that because that means we're hiring a lot more people, but would like for us to take on that cost to them. And then our substitutes, so Dr. Ballinger has already talked about that increasing. I did look at some numbers because he stole my thunder that, that request to fill is, 71 to 81%, which is great. That fill rate's wonderful. It would be nice if we didn't have to have all of that, but just in January, we had over 20 employees out on short-term, long-term, or FMLA. And that's almost $30,000 just in January in subs. It's not just call-outs. It's not just illnesses. Like, these are people that are unexpectedly out. And so that, just naturally that's going to increase because we can't predict those. So anyway, so would like to increase that budget as well. Right now we're at like 823,000 and it would go up to $1 million. All right, thank you.
Next, I would like to invite Dr. Costner.
All right, well, board members, thank you. I just want to kind of briefly go over our increases. As you can see, the transportation is requesting a 9.19% increase this year. The justification for that is, first of all, we want every child to get to school safely. That's the bottom line, and that's the way it's set up. And as you know, fuel costs are probably going to go up. So we have to account for that. Now, following directly with our strategic plan, we want to make sure, like objective one of our strategic plan is vehicle purchases and maintenance. The parts that it takes to repair our vehicles, that's going up. We do need a new lift to help so that our folks can get under and work on the buses and everything. The current lift we're wanting to replace was purchased, I believe, in 2001, and so we are wanting to replace that lift. And then objective two of our strategic plan is to make sure that our routes and our stops are safe, and that's why we have included in here we need to continue to update our routing software. And that's actually one of the policies that we just are reading through talks about making sure the route description is on the bus. So we are wanting to make sure that we continue to update our routing software so we can also meet the policies too. Objective 3 of our strategic plan is to update our bus radios, systems, and procedures. And so that's the reason for our percentage increase for transportation. Move over to food services. Food services actually encompasses all of our strategic plans. If you think about this, we serve meals to our students. They do an outstanding job of serving these meals that students enjoy. So when you have a student that wants to come to school, we're improving attendance. If we provide those meals and the different fruits, anything to keep giving them choices, well, that costs. And as you know, there is an increase in our in food services right now, not food services, but supply. We also, to be able to cook and prepare this, we have to maintain our kitchen equipment. So that's why the food service asks for an increase. One of the things we talked about is, we have talked about adding a walk-in freezer. Updating those and adding a walk-in freezer, that gives extra storage. When you purchase food in bulk, you have to have places to store it. So therefore, when you can purchase in bulk, your price can go down. So it's kind of a cost benefit to help to do that. Let's talk about instruction. Instruction, one of the objectives in our strategic plan for instruction is to improve our SOL scores to where we have 90% or higher. We all know that students are going to test better when their bellies are full, when they feel good. I mean, you know, sitting here, some of us may be getting hangry, you know, because nutrition helps. It helps you through those things. And so that's one of the things, the same thing when we talk about the increase in food, the cost of food, the cost of preparing it. We're talking about family and community. That's another one of our objectives in the strategic plan. Thanksgiving dinner, give you all a flashback of that. You know how great it was. Well, there's a cost to that. Having a program in the morning time, like Donuts for Dads or something of that nature. We're able to bring in food that's good. But let's talk about eggs. You know, when this first went out, the cost of eggs was 32%. I looked it up just a few minutes ago. The cost of eggs has increased by 50%. So, an egg, I mean, you know, prices are going up that we cannot control. So that's why our food service is asking for that price increase. The last one we talk about is our custodial services, and Dr. Ballinger did touch on that. We are submitting an RFP we're working on that to get bids to come in now, but part of the contract is a level of cleanliness. If we want to make sure that we have a set level of cleanliness, because we want students to come to school, we don't want the germs are being passed around, we want to make sure things are disinfected, cleaned appropriately, and taken care of. So we got to make sure to do that. That also falls in line with our safety and healthy, clean environment, which is part of the strategic plan. So that's the reason for the 5% increase that we're asking there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Costner. And now we're going to let Rob talk about revenue, and he did provide an easier document for you guys to look at. On here, it's 3 pages, so I'll try to keep up with Rob for everybody that'll be viewing this later and everybody out here, but he did provide the board with a bigger sheet to look at.
Did that skip us one? Nope, okay. Good enough. Mine might be out of order. They are out of order.
Actually, you're right. There's a slide that went missing.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I have that one that you have. I have it in there, yeah.
Yep, there's a slide that is gone, Rob. So
Okay.
I will try to find that,
Well,
put that in there, but
We'll move on, and if it can pop up there later, we'll go back to it, because it sort of summarizes what we're going to be talking about here anyway. So if we look at the state revenue projections, right now, of course, we don't have a state budget. This General Assembly is still in session, and they will hopefully adopt a budget, and hopefully the governor will sign it, and we'll know before the June 29th time that we had getting our budget 1 year, what the state revenue is, and that, of course, is important and helpful. The sheet we've got here that is showing up on the screen is the first part of the longer one you have there, the left side, which is our state revenue projections. I've got what our approved state budget is for this year in the first column, running down to the bottom, and it's $673,848. The next is the approved state budget for this year. When the General Assembly, when the state approved a budget last year, it's a 2-year budget. So it's not only for this year, but it's for next year. So if that budget were not amended or changed, you can see down at the bottom we would get almost level funding from the state. The reason being is our membership has dropped, and we have to adjust our budget for that. Then the next column is the amendments that the governor proposed to the budget, and that goes down to the bottom. But then what I've done is the House and Senate bills have additional money included in them beyond what the governor did in his proposed budget. So I've shown that, and both of those are exactly the same, $1,059,894. And I called DOE because the finance office, I've never seen a state budget where the House and Senate in what they propose or pass is exactly the same. Usually you have the governor's is one number, House is another number, Senate is another number, and they come together and come up with a budget. But in this case, they're exactly the same. They're distributed a little bit differently, the programs and things, but again, total numbers the same. So if that were approved, what the House and Senate bills contain, the total state revenue would be $42,789,505. So the next frame we'll look at will be the right side of the wide sheet you have. That's our federal revenue, miscellaneous, and then any transfers in and out. And the big differences here you can see coming down the page there, about the middle of the page at the bottom of the miscellaneous revenue. We used to receive, or we did this year, and in the past have, a qualified energy conservation bond rebate. That's part of the energy savings contracting we did a number of years ago. And some of that savings went towards renovating RESI. Well, the county has said, at least been given an indication that they would take over that bond payment and basically be paying all of the school bonds. So if they do that, we would see that $666,000 reduction in non-labor, but also the reduction in that revenue. They would keep that to help go towards the bond payment. And I guess bottom line, when you get to the bottom line there, the county appropriation to balance our budget to the number that's shown on the summary sheet that disappeared, our total budget would be $79,409,455, which is a $3.2 million increase over this current budget, but would require, because of the loss of the per pupil funding from the state for the all-in per pupil funding, would require an increase in the county appropriation of $4,276,356.
And Rob, I found your slide, so.
There it
Thank Doug
is.
for that, so.
So that slide is a summary of the budget that comes up to the $79,409,455. Excuse me. So what we've done here is compared what the proposed budget is for next year with all the salaries and benefits that we've talked about here previously in the presentation, all the positions, and compared it to what it is for this year. Then the additional positions we're proposing for this year, the 409,814 last year, well, not last year, this year, we have 362,358 in additional positions included. And then those enhancements that we spoke about would be $82,637. We didn't do any enhancements this year in the budget, so that's zero. And then our non-labor, with that per pupil allocation that we talked about and any adjustments, in particular the increases that we talked about, brings the total budget to $79,409,455, which, as I mentioned, is a $3,215,466 increase over this current budget.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ballantyne. And then as far as when we looked at our proposed revenue reductions and reallocations, such as Mr. Ballantyne just mentioned, that all-in per pupil funding, that's $1.5 million. Then one thing that we're also moving out of what has been historically in Warren County in the operational budget is we receive, the county does receive textbook money, but that has been included into the operating budget in non-labor for approved expenditures. So there are things that we have been purchasing. That's why when Ms. Bragg says that there hasn't ever been any money or, it was never put in the textbook account. We have a textbook account, and I have, since I've been here, been trying to start to build that up, but I've just never been able to get that money transferred over to where it could start accumulating to where we'd be able to purchase the textbooks when we need to purchase textbooks. This removes that $426,000 out of the operating and puts it into the textbook fund. So when we look at our textbook fund along with our child nutrition fund, we would be requesting $4.33 million for child nutrition, and for our textbook fund, $426,973. And then we're almost done with our. When you look at facilities, here we're requesting $875,278 in facilities for next year as a capital improvement. $50,000 of that is to upgrade the management system at 5 schools. We have 5 schools left that we need to update that management system. On our schedule, HJB is scheduled for a shingle replacement on the roof. That's $366,000. And then we are recommending that we renovate tennis courts at one of our high schools. The good news is we did find another vendor, and we did get a quote that took that down. I think the cost, the original bid was about $700,000, correct? And you can see that we've gotten that down to $459,000. So we were able to get a lot cheaper quote on renovating our tennis courts versus what we had earlier. So Mr. Helmick, I want to thank him for reaching out and doing his due diligence and trying to find us another vendor to get us an additional quote for that. So that did reduce what the tennis courts were going to be. So that would be $875,278. And again, these are just some pictures of our tennis courts. They are a safety hazard. It's going to get to the point to where we will not be able to participate. You have to remember we do have community members that use our courts. The goal would be to also implement pickleball as we renovate those so that they could be used more by our community. But you can see there that we do have some issues at our tennis courts. So I want to thank everybody for listening to this long presentation. Again, this is a needs-based budget based on the needs of our students and staff. There is no decision that needs to be made tonight, but now at this time we will entertain any questions that you have. So we'll try to address any questions or that you have concerning our budget proposal.
I have a question on the, it's way back on slide 27, but where you were talking about moving a pre-K teacher to somebody different.
To reading specialist.
To a reading specialist at AS Words. I just had a general question. Are the pre-K teachers completely out of our budget? We get some money from the Virginia Preschool Initiative?
No, that's still within our budget. And I did talk to Ms. Vaca to see what she was projecting from the state next year, and it was the same. And so she said that, yes, we could reallocate that teaching position. But no, we do receive in our funding, I think if you look at, let me get to, you'll see on here, Rob, you want to point out where preschool initiative right here?
Yep. Yes.
So it is on that sheet. That's where the funding for pre-K comes in. So it is still in our operating budget.
I would like to just sort of reiterate what I said last meeting, which is, we have a increasing budget, increasing requests, and a decreasing enrollment to some degree. It's just something looking at saying the Board of Supervisors, obviously, they're the ones that are going to need to make a decision about our requests, and that we're going to go up $4,276,000. That's going to affect a taxpayer who the taxpayers already worked up about a lot of things, rightfully so. So it's just something I would highly recommend, having plans B and C, as we've mentioned in our budget committee, be able to say, well, if we can't get this, what if they do flat fund us again? What do we do about it? So it's great. I do believe the needs have been well presented of what they are, and I'm glad that many of the strategic planning goals were brought into that, so that's a good thing. But I do think it's going to be, in this time and where we are, it's going to be very difficult to get another $4 million from the Board of Supervisors for local funding. So just sort of be cautious about where we're going and be able to have a good landing for the other options. That what could it be? What we may have to get rid of in the good, even though they're great requests, what might we have to get rid of in order to, if they flat budget it, fund us again?
Yeah, I would like to jump on that as well with the psychology of budgeting. I know I say it every year, and I know my words are never heeded, and then we never get our money. So maybe this year we try a different approach, and instead of asking for the world, tone it down and ask for the absolute critical things. Because what I suspect is going to happen is the Board of Supervisors is going to get this ask of almost $3 million, and they're going to say, have a nice day, you get nothing. It needs to be pared down an insane amount to find the absolute critical things. The county doesn't have the money. They don't have it. It's not that they are choosing to deprive school children. They don't have the money. So any additional ask is going to come from the tax-paying citizens who are already furious about increased values. So I would highly suggest you try a different approach, so that way we don't shoot ourselves in the foot by getting asked. It's too much. I won't harp on it. You're going to do whatever you're going to do, and we're going to get whatever we're going to get, so it doesn't even matter. Where in here does it show a line for how much we get for the meals tax money? Do we have a specific amount that comes in for that?
Well, that comes in, my understanding is that comes into the county.
county, right.
Yes, we don't,
But it's supposed to only be spent on capital improvement projects. And let me take you down the rabbit
Yeah.
hole that I'm on with this. Because for those who don't know, historical data on this, in 2003, there was a referendum vote in Warren County. And I've pulled the language on it. It is very specific that meals tax money is to be spent solely and exclusively for capital improvement of schools. Now, has it been? I won't say what I suspect, but I want to see specifically, and I know we might have to get that from the county, but maybe we need to request it. I want to see specifically how much is coming in so that we can better track exactly where that money is being spent. So that hopefully it can help with our budget in those areas.
I do know originally, back in 2003 or whenever that was done, that it was earmarked for school debt service.
Okay, so is that what
And
you're
it was
using
put
on?
aside for school debt service, particularly the building of the 2 high schools that were completed in 2007. And, back then I remember seeing the numbers and seeing how much, of course, the debt service was much more than what was brought in, so it was being used for that. And the debt service is still larger, I'm sure, than the meals tax. So
Yeah, I was looking
somehow
at
the
that
debt
saying,
service is getting paid, that money's coming in, and more is going out towards debt service. Whether
Okay.
it's that exact stream of money or
Yeah, I was looking at their total bond expenses the other day, and as we know, certain school renovation projects, I find them to be questionable. We're renovating a stadium that is, yes, it's the home field for both high schools, but it also is used for other purposes. The issues surrounding the library and how that money was spent. Finding out that Villa Avenue was technically renovated with the intention stated when we got the money that it was going to be used by the schools, and yet we don't get to use it. I just want to make sure that the schools are getting their fair share. So I think we need to track that money closely. Otherwise, I had other questions written on here, but I'm not even gonna ask them. I don't think this budget's gonna have a chance at passing as it is, so.
Well, it
just
does
let
take
us move on.
support. You know, this is a needs-based budget based on the needs of what I feel is there, that it is pared down. And let me just explain this to you, that you take all that stuff out, you don't have enough just to give teacher raises. So you're gonna have to have an ask from the county.
Right, and we're
So that's
jeopardizing all of
just
it.
where we're at.
No, it's fine.
And I think one thing I would like to point out, when you look at the slides of the discrepancies concerning local revenue to state revenue and the percentages that have gone, that gap, as Mr. Ballantyne and I
Has
were
widened.
talking, that gap is where we're at. You know, if that trend line would continue, we would be in a different
But see,
situation.
that's
So-
not, and actually, like, since we're gonna get into it, fine, we'll get into it. That was actually one of my notes. So that's actually not a true representation of data, because just because the state has come up with additional funds, the state tax base comes from the entire state, which a lot of that draw comes from the big money in Northern Virginia. That's a good thing when we see that that revenue coming from the state is increasing, and that Warren County is getting to take a bigger piece of that pie from a tax base that is much more well off than we are. The state has run with a surplus for quite some time now, and to get to have that money directed to Warren County is great. That local amount of money, which has steadily gone up with a little tiny dip in there, that's us. That's our taxes on our homes. And when I look at the median income in this county, and I see that people are talking about the fact that they are going to lose their home if their mortgage goes up, and they are on fixed incomes, and we've got, less than 20% of the county actually has a child in public schools. It's unfair to use that statistical data of the state being more generous with the funds from the rich areas of the state and extrapolate that to mean that our Board of Supervisors locally is doing something that's detrimental to us. I say this every year. A budget season doesn't go well when you create an adversarial relationship with the people you're asking to get the money from.
We're not creating an
maybe we try something
adversarial
different this year.
relationship.
Maybe we don't. You're going to do what you're going to do. So,
And I feel that is representative as far as with
Okay.
the comparisons to how local revenue has trended with state revenue.
great. It
in
didn't
the
work
past,
out last year. I called it last
Okay.
year, and it didn't go the way
Any other
so
questions?
It is what it is.
I think something that would be helpful for us to have as well, and it might have been presented in here, especially for when we have our meeting on the 25th with the Board of Supervisors, is also just to highlight what state money will depend on us matching that or adding money to it, because I think it's important to remember that some of that state money is going to be tied to us providing this increase in salaries, and if we can't achieve that, then that state money is going to disappear. And so I think we just need to know that not getting the increase from our local funding also directly will decrease our state funding.
I wanted to make a similar comment, because when you see that graph where the state funding is going up, I mean, I can see how naturally you would think, oh, well, the schools are getting more money, so you're better off, so we probably don't need as much from the locality. That
That's
makes
not
sense.
what I think at all, but okay.
But when the state gives us that money, they're also requiring us to increase teacher salaries, among other things. We have to hire these VLA positions. And so those increases are offset by their increases in funding, but they're not completely covered by that. So even though the state funding goes up, to a large extent, we have to spend that money, and usually more, on increasing teacher salaries, which is important, and I'm glad that we can increase teacher salaries, but that leaves us a smaller piece of the pie to do everything else, which is why I think, what we've heard about our non-labor budgets, they're not going up because we have to continue spending more and more of that local revenue on only salaries, because the local revenue is not going up, and the state is requiring us to increase our local match to receive the state funds. So, I mean, it is going up from the state. We are able to pay increased salaries to our teachers, which I think is needed, but it does not really equate to our budget having more money in it for anything except that one thing. the way it's set up. And step in if I'm mistaken.
I guess I'll just take this opportunity to remind the public that our next public hearing on the budget is going to be at our March 5th meeting,
ma'am.
and that meeting starts at 6:30, and it's at the Government Center.
Yes, ma'am.
Next up this evening, we have the 25-26 Program of Studies. Ms. Bragg.
So tonight is just the presentation of any new courses, deleted courses, or changes to the courses that we offer in our middle school and high school program of studies. We did meet in January and in early February with the high school and middle schools to go over any course requests that we would consider for the upcoming school year. So in front of you for middle school, you will notice that we have Warren County Middle School proposals and Skyline Middle School proposals, and that is primarily due to the difference in schedules between the two schools. Because Skyline Middle is on a 7-period day, Warren County Middle is on a block schedule. There is some difference in how we offer our electives, which is primarily what we're dealing with here with these course requests. So at Warren County Middle School only, they requested a PE strength and conditioning course available to grade 8. I think it's important to note that grade 8, like I'll just call it general PE, will still be available to students. This would be an elective option for students that are interested in kind of getting into the weight room, that sort of thing, for some of our 8th graders. For any concerns about safety related to strength and conditioning at grade 8, the students will have to pass a weight room safety test, and I just thought it was important that the board recognize that we're putting in the measures in place to make that, a safe process of putting that class at Warren County Middle School at grade 8 PE. Also, with 2 other electives, the art course and the Family and Consumer Sciences Exploratory 3 course, again, those are both for grade 8. The request was to include a 36-week option for these elective courses. So it has to do with the elective rotation schedule of 8th graders. So for example, if I'm an art student and I sign up for art as an elective, because electives run at Warren County Middle on an A-B schedule, I'm only attending art every other day. So essentially, I'm only getting a 9 weeks course of art or the FACS course. If I really love art and I want to take art as a year-long elective, that's what the 36-week option would allow. I would still only have it every other day, but I would be allowed to take that elective for the entirety of the school year and not just a semester. So those 2 options would be available to grade 8 students. The curriculum would expand a little bit as far as what the students were able to delve into, because it would be essentially an additional 9 weeks worth of instruction, and that would be indicated in the program of studies. At Skyline Middle School, removing the theater elective for grades 6, 7, and 8 and replacing it with the general music course, and that is primarily due to where the teacher is endorsed and licensed. They are not endorsed to teach theater. They could teach the general music course and have the proper endorsement for that class. At high school, suggesting a couple of new electives, 2 CTE courses, a travel and tourism and marketing course, and a sports and entertainment management class. Both of those courses The high schools are still considering if both of those will be offered at each high school, one or the other. We should be able to provide you with that information of exactly who may be considering adding this to their course slate, if it would be at both schools or if it's just only at one. We'll let you know before we make any final decisions on the vote. And again, that may have just to do with like the endorsement, the blocks that are available, etc. We'll be adding the Future Educators Academy to the program of studies. That's the presentation that you heard from Mrs. Byard from Laurel Ridge about that opportunity for 11th and 12th graders who are interested in pursuing a potential college career and further in education. So we will add that opportunity to our program of studies. At the advanced art courses, Art 3 and Art 4, there was a request to add a teacher recommendation as a prerequisite to that course. In those cases, adding that teacher recommendation does not preclude any students who are looking to get a sequential art checked off on their graduation course requirements. So that truly would be to help kind of funnel those truly advanced art students into those course requirements. It would not impact a student who, for example, was looking to obtain that sequential graduation requirement through art. It doesn't, they're able to do that in the other art courses. And then we would need to delete anatomy and physiology dual enrollment because we do not currently have a teacher that is approved through Laurel Ridge to teach that course. Should we hire someone that might have that master's and 18 plus hours in anatomy, we would be able to reinstate it. But as of right now, we do not have a certified teacher for that course. So just wanted to put the potential program of studies changes. Also, we are working towards getting the complete program of studies for 25-26 available in a full Spanish version and posted to our website once the program is approved. Any questions on where we're headed with the program of studies for next year? Okay. Thank you much.
Thank you. Next up this evening, we have discussion of a new potential policy, JFHAB, Section J for students, privacy, dignity, and respect for all students in Warren County Public Schools. This came forward in basically in 2021 and 2023. Our previous boards at the time have had discussions of model policies. And while we don't have this in a spelled out policy, at least in my reading it, I think this is basically what we're following in our schools now. What we were told by our attorneys in 2023 is that we were in compliance with the new model policies that came out at the time. And that's what we've been doing in Warren County Public Schools since then. So I have this in front of us.
I was looking into watching some old videos and reading news stories about various things in the past. And I noticed on 8/4/21 that the school board voted 3-2 in favor of approving Ralph Northam's model policies in this area, which you do. And there were a whole bunch of policies. Some had to do with this. Some were just policies. There were just a whole lot were that day. The biggest one being policy AC, which is about discrimination and who you can and cannot discriminate against, and that's been in there the whole time. One of the things I noticed, though, in the 2023 Youngkin time that came up, this never happened at the school board meetings and anything I could find. I scoured it for videos and news stories and whatever. I couldn't see where anything was adopted other than anything. They were never adopted. So one of the things that even the VSBA talks about, I have their printout here saying, to comply with the express requirements, local school boards must adopt policies that are at minimum consistent with this or can be even more comprehensive. And I know there's piecemeal ones in there throughout that can match up and make it all together, but I thought this that other counties have is just kind of nice, bundled up. Here it is. It's all in sort of a one sheet of paper that you can read over and get a full understanding of it instead of trying to go through it all and figuring out what do we do with this. And I believe we are doing it. There's no we need to do something different. It's just as our lawyer and Dr. Ballinger in our communication with us has said, we're already doing this stuff. Why have a set policy? I say we have a set policy because we don't have a set policy that encompasses the entire thing. So from the idea of policies, it's always good to have a policy that encompasses as much as you can in one fell swoop, pulling things together from other places. So, yeah, I went back and read those ones that were accepted by the school board back in 2021. Looked at them all. I'm like, yeah, this is great, good stuff. But this one, this particular writing of this one, I would like it to be thought of as possibly adding to it and having a first reading at a future meeting to say, is this something that can benefit us to have it all, again, in one spot? It's all in compliance with what we're supposed to do. I mean, obviously, we could have a new governor next time, and maybe it all changes, maybe go back to it, but at least we'd have something in place, because, again, even at the 2023 time, unless someone can show me where it happened, I was unable to find a time when anyone took a vote as to that we were adopting the new policies, because there were new model policies, and so it wasn't the same as before, it was different, but there didn't seem to be any action taken from the board that there was anything new involved.
Yeah, so I think the only thing I can add to the 2023 is there wasn't a board vote, because at the time our attorneys told us, hey, you're
It all
following
meets it.
these, you're
Okay.
following these policies with what was already adopted. These are the things we're doing. I think the things that we did change at that time was some of the parental approval letters. Like, so we updated those things for the start of the 23-24 school year.
Right.
That I think was the biggest change that we found with that updated, with the Youngkin's model policies in 23. Otherwise, our attorneys at the time, it wasn't that the board didn't discuss it, we discussed it with our attorney, and
Okay.
they advised us that we were covered.
Well, one of the things that this one goes into more detail about is how people are, talking about use of bathrooms, identification of students, and who gets to, what student records, it just goes in. I don't know if we have policy about any of this stuff in our.
We're already doing it all.
Right.
I think this just very clearly spells it out, so that there's no misunderstanding.
Yeah, it's very well, again, we're doing, to the best of my knowledge, we're doing everything that's on here. I don't want anything to change from what we're doing.
Right.
It just seems like from the point of policy, when you don't have it all in one spot, people get confused and they start reading over here and reading over here and reading over here, and you have to be a genius to figure it all out and put it together. So the fact that it's all together, and a number of other counties have thought this is a good place to put it all together. Again, it's just an easier way to look at it and say, we're already doing this, but here's the exact place where we're talking about it. So there are some topics in there that I don't think are covered in the rest of our, I haven't read all the policies we have, but there's a couple of topics in here that aren't specifically laid out. And if it's not specifically laid out, then it's up to someone's, on the call, make the decision as you're going, sort of, which isn't always a good thing.
Yeah.
So that was the reason it was brought up. This is just a discussion of it, but I personally would think it'd be a good thing to get into a public reading, and, people can give their inputs or whatever they want to do for it, but that was why I brought it up.
I mean, like I said, I think it's things that we are already doing, so I don't have any personal opposition to bringing it forward for a first reading. I mean, maybe in talking about it, someone will tell us otherwise, like,
Yeah.
hey, you're not doing
Right.
that, or we could do this better, or I don't know, but I think I've read it several times now, and I think our attorney looked at it,
Yeah.
Dr. Ballinger looked at it, like you said. I think they all believe this is what we're doing already.
Just putting it all in one place. So that was I understand we have it in many places, most of it. This would put it in one place to make it easier for people to reference. So that would be, I know we're not supposed to do anything, there's no motions or anything, but that, for a future meeting, I would like it to be just to have a first reading, and then we go from there and do the whole 3 reading business.
I would suggest that, I would ask, could we just wait a little bit until the budget season is through? Because I feel like we have a lot of really important and weighty budget issues that we want feedback on from the community, that we want discussion on, and I would worry that this would detract from that. And if we could just wait till like maybe June, then it could have its own time to be focused on, and the budget could have its own time to be focused on. I just would hate to have those two things competing, especially since it has already been since 2023, and we're already doing it. Like, I don't think it's like an emergency situation that something needs to change or happen. So that's my thought. I wonder if we could wait a little bit.
Well, we're going to have other, there's no emergency, you're right. There are a number of other policies we're going to be sending down the pike to have discussion, just like we just did, 15 of them today or whatever. So there's going to be more coming down from SBMA. So, one of our biggest goals in life is to set policy. That's one of the things that the school board's supposed to do. So I understand the budget's important, we have to get input from it, but number one thing we're in charge of is setting policies to clear up any confusions. So I don't see it as I mean, maybe there'll be riots and people will come in and say their thing and they'll have issues with it, but as we all just said, we're already doing this stuff, there's nothing new about it. It should just sort of be a checkbox and say, here we are.
I see your point. However, we have lived through 2021 and subsequent years, and I do see Ms. Lowe's point on just, we are doing
Maybe
it
a
already.
compromise in the middle between now and
I
June.
completely disagree with.
Well, we could put it on, I mean, the budget goes on, could go on till August, right?
We can't just put all of our operations and work and discussions on everything else on hold.
But this
because
isn't
of
something that has even been brought to us. I mean, this is
Well,
something
it
we're
has
doing.
been
Well,
brought to us
yes,
by
it's
a
been
board
brought-
member.
yes,
Our
of
lawyer
course.
said it's perfectly fine. We're
But
already
that we're
doing
already
things
doing,
like.
and it would be redundant.
Well,
Well, I don't know if
no,
it's,
not
again, it's taking
redundant.
stuff, like we went through our last budget, we took things that were in something and we moved it to a different place to have it a better position in the booklet. I mean, it's not redundant, it's just putting it all in one place to say it's an easier place to find. Because I'll tell you right now, if you go through and try to look through our book policies and try to piecemeal this stuff together, you won't find them all because you just won't. So it's a lot, it's just hard to find. It's just all, this topic's important for people and it's easy to find. This is such a, 2.5 pages, it's like, oh, there it is. You know, everything you want to know about it. It's pretty cool.
I mean, we had a reading of, the second reading of this whole long list of policies tonight. So, I mean, you can't have it both ways and say, oh, we're gonna work on these policies, we're gonna draft new letters for this, and new letters for that. No, that what we need to do is do this now and have it in place, plenty of time for the new school year. I mean, if we put this off till after budget in June, like, this isn't gonna be done before the handbook goes out and everything, like, it's not like this adds a huge workload to us.
No, I'm not worried about,
yeah.
not worried about a huge workload.
Well, that's my 2 cents on it.
Anything else?
So can this go to first reading at the next meeting?
I don't have a strong opinion about it.
Well, do we vote on whether it goes to first? I don't know how these things
well,
operate. How do we get
We
there?
can't vote on anything.
Yeah.
Right, well, how do we get there?
We can reach a consensus as a board whether or
Yeah, I
not
mean,
we're
we
going to
just
have
do a
this go to the
consensus.
first reading.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fine. That seems to be. the
Oh, I think it's
preference.
fine. Do you think it's
I
fine?
think it's fine,
Well, there's
yeah.
3 people think it's fine. Anyone else think it's fine?
All right. Can we get a motion to go into closed session?
This motion is made that this open public meeting of the Warren County School Board become a closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711. The school board desires to discuss the following matter in a closed meeting. Section 2.2-3711A1. Discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of employees of the school board, specifically the personnel report addendum, and employee number 2025-0219-01, and employee number 2025-0219-02.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Mr. Valentine, could you do roll call, please?
Yes. Mrs. Lowe?
Aye.
Dr. Funk?
Aye.
Madam Chair?
Aye.
Mr. McFadden?
Aye.
Mrs. Salins?
Aye.
Thank you.
According to the votes recorded by the clerk, the school board of Warren County does hereby certify that, to the best of each member's knowledge, one, only public business matters lawfully accepted from open meeting requirements under the Freedom of Information Act were discussed in the closed meeting to which the certification applies, and two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered by the school board.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Mr. Valentine, could you do roll call, please?